Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 225. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge on the comic forums, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, Yogi Bear's best friend, and still the sensei of the Whatnot and Duke of Segulin. On this episode, and actually that'll make a little bit more sense after you start listening to this episode. On this episode, we're talking about Batman the Cult. This is going to be the first of a two-part dissection of this wonderful miniseries released in 1988. And this is something we've been waiting to get to on the show, and the next two episodes are going to be devoted to this one. So definitely join us for our in-depth discussion on Batman the Cult. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Want to remind everyone about the New York Comic Con and the Podcast Arena. It's October 8th, 9th, and 10th. Also, on Friday night, there is going to be a podcasting panel. And it's at 6:30, and we'd love to see you there. But New York Comic Con, it's going to be a wonderful experience. The guest list is staggering. It's nycomiccon.com. Right at the top of the Raging Bullets website, there's actually a direct link to both buying tickets and also right to the website. So definitely check out from ragingbullets.com and click on and take a look at who's going to be coming. The guest list keeps expanding every time I turn around. So there's still guests being added even at this point. This con is going to be huge. So we definitely love to see you there at the New York Comic Con. Our sponsors for this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Actually, since we're getting close to the end of the month for DCB Service, and they're going to be getting ready to change the book soon, I thought I'd shout out something that Jim mentioned to me as we were watching Smallville yesterday. Superman Batman Apocalypse is coming out, and it's on Blu-ray, DVD, and a special edition DVD. I didn't realize this. I've never done this before, but Jim orders all of his DC Universe DVDs from DCBService.com. And I didn't even think to look to see if they had them on their list. And what happens is, on the week that it's comes out in the stores with your shipment, if you do like weekly shipping or if you do monthly shipping, depending on, it comes with your shipment, whatever the next shipment would be that it comes with. So Jim gets his the same week that it's released in the store from DCBService.com with his comics. So he saves on shipping, if you were to order from another site or something like that. So that's really kind of a cool way to do that. And I thought I'd shout that out just as an opportunity to take a look at anything that you're really pre-ordering that's comic book related. Check out DCBService.com to see if he has it and save on that shipping. Because if you're already paying for it shipping through them, you might as well, reap the benefit of that. But I thought it was kind of a cool thing. DCBService.com carries a lot more than just comics, so it's kind of a great opportunity to save some cash bundling things together, which in this economy we all need to do that. So thank you DCBService.com for carrying such a wide selection of products. I saw a cool thing at InStockTrades.com that people might have missed, and I always love this. I'm a big fan of these oversized collections of Alex Ross's work that were put out. I'm talking about Superman Peace on Earth, Batman War on Crime, Shazam The Power of Hope, Wonder Woman Spirit of Truth, JLA Secret Origin, and JLA Liberty and Justice. These 6 works are collected in a new trade paperback that has behind-the-scenes developmental art, and these were produced between 1988 and 2003. It's called The World's Greatest Superheroes trade paperback, and it's regularly $29.99. It's 37% off, only $18.89 from InStockTrades.com. And if you haven't picked this one up, it's like I said, Paul Dini, Alex Ross. It's 400 pages. It's gorgeous. I have this work, and it's something that I can't recommend enough, so I wanted to shout this one on the show, and that's InStockTrades.com, your collected edition source. And remember, orders of over $50 or more gets free shipping. So if there's a bunch of things that you've been kind of like holding off getting, put them together, bundle them, and save on that shipping, because it's like, really, when you get down to it, it really cuts another chunk of change off of your books if you get that free shipping. So kind of a cool way to do it. Thank you, InStockTrades.com, for your continued support of the show. I wanted to give a quick shout out to the Wonder Woman Day event. This is the 5th one, and one of our friends of the show contacted us to let us know about this. This is a charity benefit that goes on to basically take care of survivors of domestic violence and their children. The previous 4 Wonder Woman Day events have raised a grand total of more than $89,000 to benefit people in this situation, which I think is really great. There's 2 of them that are going on. One's going to be in Portland, Oregon, and it's October 24th, 2010. The second one is going to be taking place in Flemington, New Jersey at Comic Fusion as a part of their superhero weekend. And both of those are Sundays. And this is a great event where there's going to be costume heroes on site, raffles, prizes, auctions, a silent auction for original art. There's all kinds of just great events and rare memorabilia that you can bid on to be a part of this, get some great prizes, but also be a part of helping out and supporting this charity and this wonderful event. So I just wanted to shout that out really quick. There are links right up on the show notes and on our website, so please make sure to check those out and be a part of the Wonder Woman Day event. That's very cool, and I'm glad to be able to shout that out on the show. Jim, what kind of a podcast are we?
Well, Sean, we are a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're reviewing on the show. So if we're going over something you haven't read, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Carter Hall, scientific genius from a far-off world, flies into action as Hawkman.
Jim, this is a long time in coming. This is the first of a two-part discussion on Batman the Cult. The writer is Jim Starlin, illustrator Bernie Wrightson, color artist Bill Ray, letterer John Costanza. The original series editor was Denny O'Neil. The editor of the collected edition was Dan Thorsland. And Jim, this for me, we talk about favorite stories of all time. This is one I desperately wanted to make sure we eventually did on the show because this could easily go into my top 5 favorite DC stories ever. Because it's just a Batman story that really hits me. But I don't know that you feel the same way. What is your feelings on Batman the Cult? How did you like this? What's your history with it? Because I read it when it originally came out.
Well, here's an interesting thing with Batman the Cult. And I was so excited when you picked this one because I wanted to have this initial conversation and then just stuff throughout because I know it's going to go some interesting stuff. I first read this right around the time when it came out. I borrowed it. I'm pretty sure I borrowed it from my buddy Hoach when I was in BG. Because this came out in the 90s, right? Or
no, 88.
88?
We were still in high school when this came out. Junior year.
Well, okay, I read it after it came out when I was in college. You know, I borrowed it. He had told me, hey, this is a cool story. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And when I first read it, I really, really loved the story, but I didn't enjoy the comic. And the reason being was, back in that day, I was very, very rigid as to what art style I liked in a comic book. Now, I liked what I call the classic comic book or the modern comic book kind of deal, where it's Tony Daniel, Freddie Williams, kind of that kind of art style, and it's I didn't like the more artsy style, the more psychedelic kind of style. So I was sitting and I'm reading the Cult, going, man, this is an awesome story. I just wish it looked different. And there's stuff where I can remember my first time read through, especially now going through, because now I have a much different taste, and I have a much different, more appreciation. Especially, I really even enjoy this art style and enjoy how it fits into the story, and so I have a much different reaction now than I did way back when. So this is, kind of very interesting moments for me, because there was a couple stuff where I remember reading, going, the first time I can remember thinking back, oh man, that would have been so cool if it would have, really the crisp detail kind of art style, and, just seeing maybe there's a couple stuff where Bruce has some really freaky vision stuff. I'm like, yeah, that would fit for the psychedelic, but the other stuff should be this other style kind of stuff. And I remember just thinking that kind of stuff, going, wishing it looked somewhat different.
The irony of everything you're saying right now is there are longtime comic fans that are banging their heads against their iPods right now, or their computer, whatever they're listening to this on. Yeah, wait, no, hold on, hang on, let me finish.
Yeah,
because of the history of Bernie Wrightson in comics, and it's funny. When you talk classic, I think people need to remember your tenure in comics is a lot more limited than people who've been reading for 20, 30 years. And Bernie Wrightson's style, to me, it was funny. I never in a million years would have thought that you would have mentioned the art as being, originally when you read it, your point. Where are you at on the art now, though, because you've revisited it?
Yeah, I completely, nowadays I look much differently at art, and I can appreciate, what especially like with the coloring and, just some of the moments in here that, just have that's absolutely beautiful kind of stuff now. The present day sensei has much different taste than, Jim did back in college. So there's two different entities, and I'm right along with people going, "What the hell? How could you even think that kind of stuff?" There's a couple points where I was like, "Oh my god, why? How could I ever not enjoy that?" And it was funny because I never was a hater of it. I never said, "Oh, it stinks," but I always thought it could be better. I always thought, oh, it'd be just so much. It'd look so much cooler if they did this kind of stuff. And it's some of the stuff that I didn't want before is what makes it such a great story. So it's definitely going back to the cult and revisiting the cult and talking about the cult nowadays is definitely a really cool moment for me.
Because I read this as it was coming out, and the art was actually a strong selling point for me. Back in the day, I'm talking about in the 80s, and I was honestly very worried when we eventually got to the point to say, hey, let's do this on the show. I'm like, am I going to have the same experience? Because it had been a while since I read The Cult. It had been one of those, I read it when it came out, I read it when it was originally collected, and then, I've read it multiple times throughout the years, but I certainly had not read it for a good 7 years or so at least. And my memories were so vivid on how much I loved the story. And it was always one of those that I quoted as just being one of my favorite. Friends of mine said, hey, can you recommend me a good Batman story? The Cult was always one I went to. And I was really deathly afraid that, I'm going to read this again. And reading it today, it's going to lose something. And it was just the opposite. The depth of this story, I think I enjoyed it even more now than I did back in the day, and that's hard for me to even imagine because it was instantly I voted for a character to live based on this book. This is the one that Jason Todd, his portrayal in this I thought was brilliant. And what was done to Batman in this and how it was so immediate. We were dropped in the middle of it, and we didn't know what was going on with Bruce. I remember that as going, because I read this cliffhangers for me. The cliffhangers at the end of each issue, I had to wait until the next issue came out to find out what was going to happen next. It wasn't a matter of, that I had the trade and I could read it the next day, or I could even, just read the whole thing in one sitting, which I've done many times since. This book, I literally had to wait 4 months or so? I don't remember. I don't remember if it released exactly perfectly monthly when it came out. But if it didn't, it was pretty darn close. And this was waiting in between was just like, whoa, what's going to happen next? This was a story that totally gripped me. And I'm thrilled to say that it still holds that exact same appeal. And it's a story, it doesn't feel, and I don't know, maybe you felt differently, I don't know. For me, nothing about this felt dated to me. Other than the fact that Jason Todd was Robin, the story still reads very contemporary.
Not only does this read very contemporary for me, the fact, the Jason's portrayal, I see a lot of Tim Drake, where I could, there are parts in this where I'm like, you could throw Tim Drake in there and have, change the costume, make it the modern costume, and it would be, him. And even some probably, Damien's starting to get to the point where he could be in. So this definitely holds up to present day Batman. And even, heck, we could see Dick Grayson going through the same kind of ordeal and dealing with it the same kind of way. So this really not only stands up the test of time, this really fits right in. Boom, you could throw this into continuity right now and it would fit.
It's funny, as this story kicks off and we're looking at that amazing house, I didn't know, I remember when I first read it, I didn't know what was going on. Because I'm like, this is on the site of Wayne Estates. What is this whole thing? I didn't realize it was a dream sequence, obviously, until we actually see the reveal. But rereading it now, when you were talking about before, I was like ready to scream when you're going, yeah, when I originally read this, I didn't like the art because of the lack of detail and all that stuff. It just didn't hit me that way. I'm like looking through not only the house, but the interior sequence with all the weapons and armory there, and just you can actually look at on the weapons individual points where you would stick your finger in to pull the trigger, for the bazooka there, straight on through to the different swords having actual lines of detail that you can see on them, and actually cobwebs all the way through. It's such a gorgeous piece as he's going through and sets this creepy, dark mood that really never leaves the book until the very end.
I know, and it's funny because this opening sequence, and then going into Uncle Joker, all of that stuff was one of those
Uncle
moments
Joker.
this was right at the beginning of the read-through, so I was like, oh my god, I was such an idiot, because that opening page, you're talking about the weapons on the wall, but even the Uzi, right at the bottom corner, right at the base where that old cannon is, considering we later see Bruce with that same gun, I thought that was kind of cool. I'm like, oh my god, how I'm kicking myself going, how could I ever think this wasn't a detailed art style? And I tell you, a lot of it probably is because of the psychedelic coloring style, and as I said, back then I had a very rigid understanding and acceptance and enjoyment of artwork in my comics. So this fell off, this was the artsy style of comic book, and I never really got into it until, I actually learned to better appreciate artwork and learn to appreciate how it's part of the story, how it's part of the tone setting. It's the movie soundtrack, for the comic. And once I'm, nowadays I get it and understand it and I enjoy it. So yeah, this sequence, this was one of those moments, and it's funny because it's the opening sequence. I'm like, oh my god, this is going to be an interesting discussion.
Well, and I love that it's such a setting of also this battle that is going on with him internally. He's already at this point in time been heavily worked over as far as being brainwashed. So this is his mind now dealing with what Deacon Blackfire is trying to teach him, as far as that his way's always been wrong.
Yeah.
And now coming to terms with the fact, what is a dream, what is reality, who am I? And that battle is something that's amazing throughout this. I've always mentioned on the show that one of my some of my favorite Batman stories are the ones where we really feel like we're there with Bruce. We get inside his head and go on a journey with him. And sometimes see his vulnerabilities. See that he's not this indestructible machine, that the man has compensated for being human by, over the years, trying to run through as many possible scenarios, trying to build gadgets and tricks and little ways of compensating for things that human beings just can't do. Whether it's training yourself to a perfect sense, whether it's, running through battle scenarios that nobody in their right mind would do. He does all of these things that none of us would spend our time obsessing over to make himself one of the most perfect human beings and able to deal with almost every situation. I love these moments, though, where we get to see him vulnerable internally, get to see the scared kid again, growing back into Batman. And the rage going against the Joker and the frustration again going against the Joker in this mental sequence, knowing the fact that Joker's killed people, how that whole era changed. It's funny, I'm thinking of that DC Universe Legacy story that was just out, where we got to see, did you read the most recent issue of DC Universe Legacy?
Yes, so they're dealing with the crises.
And the Joker, and that shift from it being the kind of a game between the heroes and villains to this dark era that really, the 80s was a big, big part of this, where we got to see these villains doing a lot more killing. And it's funny how reading that issue and then also rereading The Cult again and looking at this, I'm like, wow, it's really that issue grabs the tone of a lot of what was going on during this time. A lot of this started before The Cult was released, but it was interesting to read that in tone and comparison and just see how much, these were some interesting moments for him. But I love seeing when you see him, for some reason with Batman, when you see him with that fear on his face or the confusion in those moments in the dream sequence, I'm like, I know a dream when I see it, don't I? There's something about that added to a fear factor in the story for me, because we so rarely see that from Bruce. The emotion in the cowl. It's usually when the cowl's pulled off of his head that we see more of his humanity. This is with the cowl on that we see that. And I remember that being, especially in 88, something that was very striking for me about this sequence was to see him so vulnerable. And I was captivated.
Yeah, I tell you, just Joker sequences, when they're done right, just really, it's that blend of that darkness, but there's that little bit of, that's dark humor kind of deal, but it's also taking it over to the next level. And this was just a great whole lead into where you got his April Fool's joke where he's strapped bombs to his body and goes to blow them up, but no, they're flowers. And Bruce is like, no! And you just see that rage going. And then right up to the point where he's basically, Lizzie Borden's him with the axe, just starts pounding on him. And the thing that got me with that whole sequence, because you're talking about the emotion in the cowl, the one thing I liked was seeing the satisfaction on Bruce's face while he's still in the dream sequence when he kills the Joker. And that satisfaction in killing kind of, I took it as that was his body kind of like jump-starting him, trying to, it's that, that shock to wake the system, because Bruce, Wayne, Batman would not enjoy killing somebody. So here he's getting that satisfaction, and it's kind of like his, subconscious trying to fight the effects, trying to, just give him that little poke saying, hey, wake up, come on, pull yourself out of it type of deal.
That's why he's always called it the easy way out, though. Mm-hmm. And that's why he always avoids it, because of the fact that, yes, it'd be very easy to do this, but it's also, and you see him in those sequences where he's swinging that axe. He really is, at that point, what makes him different than the villains that he fights. There is no control. There is no law. There is no rhyme or reason to it. He is becoming an agent of chaos, very much like the Joker. At that moment, he's lost it. At that point, if you see the rage on his face there, an innocent bystander could get hurt in that sequence. And that's one of the things that I really liked about it. It shows why he is such a controlled individual and why mentally he's tried to hone himself as well as physically, and almost detached himself at times emotionally. Because that's the funny part. Why is Batman so cold? Why is Bruce so cold? Because he needs to learn to detach himself emotionally so he doesn't wind up like this. Because this is something he combats against. He's combated against arguably since his childhood, when his parents were murdered. And it's to me, this is an interesting sequence that brings that totally out. We see him chained up, and I remember, and even when I reread this, I didn't remember this being so immediate, where we see that he's captured at this point. And Ratface is kind of filling him in on the whole sequence of time with... Now, are you reading that Deacon Blackfire, or Shaman Blackfire that they're laying out here? I read it that he really did live all that time. Are you reading it that way?
See, I think so. Yeah, I think we got something going on with... There is... I don't know. Every time I read this thing, I kind of am a little bit different on my opinion on the Deacon.
Me too.
Sometimes I'm like, no, he's just a man. There's nothing more. Then I'm like, you know what? I think maybe there's something more to this guy. And it's I toy it back and forth. This is one of those where I'm like, typically, I'm strong with that it is Blackfire the entire time. But there is always a little bit of doubt in my mind.
Because the police have records on him that date all the way back. So, is it an ancestor that, they keep passing the story down from generations? Or, does the blood thing really work? And is he more Ra's al Ghul than he's pulling off some kind of... Because even when he's to his closest associates in this, he really is putting it out there like this is legit for him. Mm-hmm. So, and I really did feel like in my most recent read through, I'm like, no, I'm back to this really is happening with him. He's just off.
I usually hold on to the fact that he is the ancient shaman, and it's the blood thing that keeps him going and all that. So I do hold on to that a lot.
And then he was murdered basically for his beliefs or what he brought to the table. That do you think it was that people feared what he was capable of, or did they see through him the way that eventually Batman needs to later?
I always held to the fact that the people saw the true heart inside him, and they realized that this guy isn't this great shaman who is going to save our people. He is a monster who needs to be put down, and that's what they tried to do. And I love just how Ratface is just preaching the gospel of Deacon Blackfire, just preaching the legend, and it's just it's all that stuff is part of the brainwashing process. You have to, it goes over time. It's, you can't just boom, done. You have to, start weakening your opponent, start throwing in the suggestions, start increasing the belief. It's not just stories. This is a belief. This is a religion. This is the kind of thing where they're going to connect it and make you have a personal connection to it. I loved seeing this process just slowly laying out. And as we're, it's a great way to tell us the story, but two, it fits in with what he's trying to do. So I was like, I really dig seeing this layout.
Now, talking about the cult and the fact that Blackfire really is pulling these people, I love that he went after the weak members of society. the people that were disenfranchised, the people that were looking for something to belong to, some sense that they were worth something. And he preyed on that. And that was something that he took advantage of with going after the homeless and, pulling people into the sewers and kind of making them like an underground society. And trying to show them that, hey, no, we can do things the right way. We can show the people up above the right way to do things. People who are already, they're looked down upon oftentimes by the members of the society up above and feel like they're inferior to them. Now all of a sudden are being empowered by Blackfire. If you're with me, we know the right way, and we will show them the right way, no matter what the cost. And we will show all of them the right way, no matter how big or small their crime is. We will bring order to a society that needs order. And that's an interesting, to prey on their sense of unfairness. And that was something that I really got into in all this. I really saw a situation where I can see how this guy was able to pull off what he did. We know how Gotham is, how low Gotham is, and how diverse the population of Gotham is. That somebody could come in and really take advantage of these people, which is what Blackfire did.
Oh, big time. It's funny because in real life, I do worry about or think that something like this could happen very easily. I don't want to say worry because, Cleveland, yes, we have our homeless population, but I don't think we have enough that they could take over the city. New York, maybe you guys should, worry about your homeless. Here, we're okay. But this is actually something that could work. And that's something I like about seeing how Blackfire lays out his plan, how he actually goes about doing this. This opening issue, really, we see him as a very calm, very, commanding presence. There's no evil. There's no animosity. He's not your typical kind of villain. No, this is a guy who's there to care for people. He's there to help them. Let me be there for you. I am your strength. I am your rock. Together we will rise up. Together we will live in peace and harmony, and everything you want will come through. And I love seeing that, just the way he's present, even when he first approaches Bruce while Bruce is chained up. Yeah. You don't see any anger, violence, or anything like that. You see him just saying, hey, we're going to tell you how it is. We're going to show you the truth.
Do you think he sent Ratface to talk to him?
Oh, definitely.
Good cop, bad cop?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And also there was that other guy who was testifying about how the cult saved him. These are all part of the process where you need, just the disciplinary. You need the person who's that peaceful voice, that calming voice. Then you need this presence, this great and all-powerful presence. You need, the Blackfire to come in like he is, the savior type of deal. These are all classic brainwashing techniques that cults use today, and it still works, and I really dig that.
This is one of my favorite lines in this opening sequence, and I actually, before I even mention this, one of the things that I love about the art in this opening sequence is I like the use of the supernatural looking Batman in this, because he seems more powerful, he seems more imposing, he seems scarier, Bruce, in this sequence. And to see him in this powerful kind of look, so broken down, beaten, and, tattered and hanging from the ceiling like he is, it added to me more of this sense of dread to the whole thing than if he looked like less beast-like, if that makes any sense. Because he's a very the physical, the fine-tuned details of his muscle structure, even when you look on the side with the abs, he just looks very powerful in all this, yet this crew has managed to work him over. And I love that we don't know yet how that happened. That's something that I think is a great build to a mystery in this story, is we're dropped in the middle of this again with Bruce, and we don't know how he got there yet. He's collecting his thoughts, and we're journeying along with that mental collection. Because he says, right, I love this line, Shaman Blackfire, Deacon Joseph Blackfire. He looks like the Redeemer he pretends to be. Powerful, confident. I could almost believe. No! I can't allow myself to think that, to even consider the possibility. That's what Blackfire wants. He wants me to doubt, to weaken. If that happens, he's won. It's a constant battle. And it really is a sign that at this early stage in it, he's been worked over for a while. And we're already seeing that, Bruce has got to really dig down deep within himself to combat it. It was a great setup to gradually showing how Blackfire is able to weaken him down to the point where we see later on in the issue. And I really loved the build from this and the pacing, which was something that I really thought was enjoyable in this. And I'm glad it was a prestige format series, because I think what the first issue shows a lot of times what creators are able to do when they have that much of a page count to deliver a story.
Yeah, and it was funny because going the flashback sequencing, popping back and forth between past and present, and just that multiple panel usage kind of deal, for me was something that this time I really appreciated. And I really enjoyed seeing, just going back to the past where he's with Gordon looking into, the thugs that beat up that biker. Then back to Batman, then back and forth between, before this happened, then at, the present day now. It's, for me, it's that kind of storytelling style. And again, this is another thing that back in the day would confuse me very easily, and it would throw me off, and I'd have to go back and reread, like, come on, it shouldn't be this much work. Nowadays, I sit there and I like the flow through. I'm like, oh, this is cool. Yeah, oh, okay, kind of deal. So it's, again, throughout the sequencing, these first couple pages, I was laughing at myself because of how I felt before as compared to how much I enjoyed this experience this time.
Not only to compliment Bertie Wrightson, but also color artist Bill Ray. When you talk about the shifting of those sequences, we go from these sewers to above ground, then, in the past. I love, in dialogue, too. Then, now. Those words popping up, it's very quick, very complete. And the important with them being concise there, it added more this sense of, I don't know what it was, it added this sense of dread and tone to the whole thing, because it wasn't this big long explanation. And previously, when things were sunnier, it was really quick and to the point, just to show you that there's an intensity to this that you can't let go of. And we get to see that the mystery building was these thugs and we're talking about nameless thugs, getting worked over to a severe level. And Batman being, obviously, who would be a number one suspect of this? Batman. And it is something that has to come sort of into question. It's an unspoken question between him and Gordon. And I love that Gordon seemed to know that, but it was clear, I don't think the entire force would believe that. And That was something Gordon had to deal with. What's going on with Batman? Is Batman doing this? Or do we have somebody else to have to be worried about? Because it's the thugs that are getting beat up, which doesn't sound like the MO of one of his goons, the Joker or the other rogues gallery. So what's really going on here? And it's interesting to set up this kind of tone that there's other vigilantes operating right now in Gotham, and that's a mystery that Batman would want to solve because they're invading his turf and also, biting into his modus operandi. He's got a goal for Gotham, and if somebody else comes in there and shakes that goal, they're going to ruin years of work that this man has put in. So he would have a major stake in this, and I loved that.
Oh, yeah, and I liked how just the little subtle stuff in that sequencing where we still get to see, Batman the detective. Immediately he knew it was multiple people, and even Gordon's like, multiple attackers kind of deal. He's like, just a little quick throwaway kind of line, a little bit part of the whole overall him explaining why it wasn't him. But again, you see the detective, you see the brain, you see just, Batman's not just the big scary bat who beats people up. There's more to him. And I always enjoy seeing those kind of stories. It's cool to see Bruce as a human, but it's also cool to see Bruce in action. It's cool to see why he is the greatest detective. And, that's something that I've always enjoyed about a good Batman story. But just the psychological style of him and just the psychological training and everything that went through this stuff, this was a big-time treat for me mentally. And as I said before, I enjoyed the story. I really liked it because I was getting that. It was just, as I said, I'm, repeating myself again, it was just that art was throwing me off. And now that I'm enjoying it all, this was just a truly enjoyable experience for me.
What's interesting is the story is going through. First of all, I love when you were talking about that detective sequence, the artwork of Bruce crouching down where you see the cape kind of flowing around him and his hands on the floor. He squats down in such a way where he can get closer to it without disturbing the crime scene. I love those sequences. But we shoot back to, again, present day, And it's another one of the homeless who's now pleading with Bruce in a very different perspective, where he's just sharing his story. It's not about smacking Bruce around now. It's really about getting into his head and saying, I was like you. I was a non-believer. I was fighting against it. When I came down here, I thought it was my drinking buddies, really trying to take my shoes and, take what was left of my dignity away from me. But then I saw the light. I saw the word. I realized what, the deacon was saying to me all along, and I've been saved. And, he's basically saying, dude, join us. You can be saved too. And it's interesting how this is a multi-staged, over time attack on his mental senses. I really loved that about this, that we got to see the different layers. And this is something that, again, is a strength of the page count of 4 prestige issues of being able to do like a mini-series like this. Because it really is 8 issues of content that you're getting from this. That is just amazing.
Yeah, classic brainwashing techniques. You separate people from surroundings that they're used to. You starve them to weaken them. Disorientation sets in. Hallucination. Plus, it makes them susceptible to suggestion. But it's not just susceptible to suggestion. What you want to do is you want to make that person look at your story, your end goal, and apply it to their life. And that's what they're doing with these people. This guy's coming down saying, yeah, you and me, we're similar, buddy. We're the same kind of guy. I had my doubts. All those doubts you're saying, I was saying those too. I looked beyond that. I saw the truth. And later on, we're going to really see them start to work kind of like Bruce's underlining mission, his underlining goal that he has for Gotham. And they're going to show him that, hey, we have the same goals. We have the same objective. And that's a great way to bring Bruce even farther into it, saying, yeah, we do have the same objective. Maybe my way was wrong. Maybe your way is correct. And it's just, as this is just a great, brainwashing, training manual for somebody if you want to go, if you want to be a little bit freaky. Granted, you got to put the time in. You got to put the time in. You have to have that charismatic presence like the deacon. Like, I couldn't pull this off. I could maybe be a rat face. I could maybe be, a couple of the homeless guys who testify. I know I don't have a Blackfire presence to me.
I love how you're sitting here saying, though, that this should be renamed to The Cult or How to Brainwash a Bat. Hey. This could be a great training manual on how to brainwash somebody if you really wanted to. And I just want to say that the Raging Bullets does not advocate brainwashing people unless they don't listen to us. Then go ahead and brainwash them. But, you're right, though. There's a certain point because Bruce analyzes it. And there comes a point in time during this analysis where I start thinking to myself, boy, is he protesting a lot. Where he's going through the classic stages because he's going through them. The starvation, being pulled away from familiar surroundings, disorientation setting in, followed by hallucinations, leaving him open to suggestion. And then he's going, but it won't work on me. My sense of reality is too strong, too strong, too strong, too strong, too strong. And that fighting of it. But also we get to see, and one of the things that I really like about this is it then flashes back to another then sequence where we get to see that not only is he dealing with the voices in his head that is being put there by Blackfire and his people, it's also the media that was analyzing what Blackfire was doing. I really loved the use of seeing the various television programs throughout this, where we get to see people's reactions to what is starting to happen in Gotham. Throughout this, from shock and awe and disgust to slowly, gradually, they are starting to buy into what's being sold to them by Blackfire and his crew, where you've got a city that's becoming very divided, and a guy who is trying to send a message to the city, and a Batman wondering if they're seeing all this now, and I'm talking about as he's being brainwashed. I'm not saying that Batman would normally see this, but as he's being brainwashed and thinking back to the past, he's starting to see maybe these people were seeing something that I should have been seeing too, and there's other voices speaking to him subconsciously as well as in his face. And I love that we find out why he's starting to become susceptible to this, but it was interesting to see that he was getting this in stereo.
Oh, yeah. And I really liked the character of Councilman Holmes. Now, when I say character, I don't mean his personal character. I mean him as a character in the story, because he is just that typical scummy politician that you sit there and after meeting the guy, you feel like you have to wash your hands a couple times because you want to get the slime off of you. And he just say, hey, had that plastic smile on his face, and you can just tell he had that, that used car salesman voice as he's talking to the news person saying everything is fine, everything's great. The homeless problem, hey, they're not sleeping outside. They're in the shelters. And the private sector stepped up. We've won this war on homeless. Yeah, all right. And I was just sitting there, and I'm dying as seeing this guy go on the news, because I'm like, dude, you have no idea what's going on. Even if Deacon wasn't around taking the people off the streets, you still would have absolutely no idea or care about the homeless. You only care how it makes you look. You're seeing something. I can get recognition for something I did nothing to do. It didn't cost me anything, but I'm going to take full credit for it because, hey, guess what? That's the kind of guy I am. And I loved seeing this news sequence.
Now, it was interesting is with breaking down the Bat, one of the things that I've, especially by later read-throughs of this book, I noticed that the amount of patience that we required to do this the way that they did it with Batman. Because he has a lot of weapons, a lot of show and tell for Bruce waiting in the wings. And he could have easily brought out all of it and played all of his cards right from the get-go in an attempt to overwhelm him. But he realizes that if he does that, and that this is where it shows the intelligence of a Blackfire. It's a creepy, evil intelligence, which goes back to his origins. They were very right to lock this man up.
Yeah.
But, he basically step by step, methodically, gradually broke Batman down and saved some of his biggest playing cards for later in the game, knowing that he would, and I totally believe that, he's cheating again. He's got cards up his sleeve. I guarantee you that there was other things that he could have probably thrown out that he maybe never even used. And that was something that I thought was interesting about the story. He reminds me a lot of what I liked about Bane, especially when Bane first appeared as a villain. I like Bane in a different way now because you're reading him as a hero in the book, and a quote-unquote hero in Secret Six. But, I mean, you're seeing him in the role where you're following him as a lead character, where you're on the side of that villain team. Back when Nightfall came out, what I liked about him is he had this Blackfire-like quality, too, where you got to see him gradually go after Batman, not just physically, but psychologically. And it was a real different twist from like a Scarecrow, who Scarecrow would attack his mind, but Scarecrow wasn't the most physical fellow in the world, you know what I mean? It was really kind of putting multiple pieces of other villains together and really going after everything that Batman is. And Bane did this very well as well, which is what makes him, I think, so enjoyable in Secret Six now. Is that same guy is so captured in Secret Six. Deacon Blackfire was one of those characters that when we saw him in Blackest Night, I kept wishing we would have more of an opportunity to see him and to do more with him, because I liked the character so much that it was kind of cool to see him as a Black Lantern Blackfire.
Yeah, and I tell you, I loved this sequence as Ratface was continuing telling the story about what happened to the tribe after they killed Blackfire. All this bad stuff started happening. The crops were dying on the stalk, unharvested. They tried to flee, and then they get slaughtered by another tribe. And it's like, this is because they were evil. They suffered. They did not have faith. They suffered and died. Let the heaven rejoice and the evil beware. Great tie-in to Batman's belief structure. It's the whole kind of criminals are a cowardly lot. Let evil beware. Punish the wicked. Save the innocent. Protect the good. Hurt the bad kind of deal. And it's a basic connection. It's a fundamental, but it is that beginning tie-in to Batman's belief structure. It's that Deacon Blackfire is punishing evil. Let evil people beware. Good people have nothing to fear from him. That's Batman's MO. Evil should be afraid of him, not the good people kind of deal. And I thought that, again, it's a great part of the brainwashing. It's a great part of just how he's able to get Batman into the fold. he's making Batman start thinking that Blackfire's beliefs and his beliefs are one and the same. And I thought that was just a cool way to just slowly start playing it out.
The interesting thing for me, too, during that sequence is I never for a second believed that Blackfire really had anything to do with the Corn or the tribe getting killed. The man was locked up, and I think those things just happened to happen, and Blackfire is taking credit for them. Or do you think that Blackfire really had something to do with those elements?
Oh, God, no. I don't think he had anything to do with it. I think, and even if it even happened at all, who knows? You know, that tribe may have been slaughtered by something completely else. None of that may have happened. That could be 100% complete fabrication story. You don't know. And that's another, but he's going to use it as part of the story. You got to continue on with the legend, the myth and the legend that is Blackfire. You got to build this thing up.
Now, this story is being told in such a way that it gives Bruce another flashback where he sees actual bad guys killed. You know, they've basically stolen enough to get 200,000 split 4 ways for 2 hours' work. And when he shows up on the crime scene, you know, it's kind of like he's seeing these people that were evil being killed. And it starts to add to what you were saying, where is his resolve weakening, or is he opening his mind to the possibility, like, maybe we do have similar goals, and, you know, it's just a different way of operating. It shows that he's starting to connect his memories with what is being told to him. I don't think at this point that Batman's broken at this point, but it does show that his mind is opening up to what's being fed to him, which I found is an interesting storytelling method, because I really felt like we were journeying inside Bruce's mind. And again, this is something that I found engaging with stories like R.I.P., and I find it just as engaging here to see this man just being mentally bombarded.
I know. And I loved the art sequence here with you see these bad guys, they kill off the Night Watchman, and they're sitting there, you know, talking, and, but in the shadows. You see the cult, you see the axe, you know what's about to happen, and then you see the aftermath. And I thought that was just a really cool, we didn't need to see them hacking into him. We didn't need to see the gore. We knew what was going to happen. We saw the aftermath. Again, it was another just like, oh, that's cool. I'm digging that.
The Dutch show up in 1609, and they find Blackfire. And this really opened this guy up. And again, he sensed the vacuity of the men's, if that's the right pronunciation of the word, the men's souls, and dealt with them accordingly. It's interesting. How would Blackfire even know what was going on with these people? Like, I'm with you in what you're saying as far as how much of this is Blackfire's spin on the whole thing and reality. Because I do see him more as a Ra's al Ghul than this god. Like, you know, he's got like this longevity, this ability to live, because he just discovered this way to use his blood to extend his life that we see later. But I don't see him as being an all-powerful god. You know, where he can just, he knows, he can reach into people's minds and souls and know what they're all about and how they feel. He really is, you know, for lack of a better term, an expert at psychological warfare, where as he gets to know somebody, he preys on what they will. Do we ever really get to know the real Deacon Blackfire, I guess, is my question. I don't think so. Maybe not until the end when Bruce really has his way with him.
Yeah, I think by the end we start to see the real deal of him, and he starts, you know, unveiling, you know, just the darkness that is him. And it's, I don't know, it's funny with the Dutch sequence, you know, them freeing him and him just striking him down. Again, that's another sequence where I'm like, how much of it did he actually do? Did he do anything? Did they just die on their own? Is there something else going on? It could be any number of things. Back in the day, a lot of settlements didn't survive. And it just,
yeah,
you know, it's hard living. They're not coming over, and, you know, it's not already a preset town. They're building the town. You know, they are the Sims kind of deal where they gotta, you know, build it up from ground up. And who knows what it could have been? Some strange thing in the water. It could have been, you know, a native tribe in the area not liking the town and taking them out. It could be the wrath of Blackfire. You never know what exactly happened. But again, I liked how this was more believers testifying, and this time it wasn't just Ratface. They were mixing it up. You got to throw different faces and different people believing this, because you don't want just one person associating the faith and the belief to. You want everyone saying, this is how we are. Join us. All is well kind of deal. And I like seeing that, especially even this guy, kind of with the beard, and he looked, kind of friendly, and just that, everybody has, that uncle or that friend or that nice old man that and he kind of for me, I kind of could see him having a very calming type of voice, kind of a grandfather-ish type of tone to him. So it was, again, I was really getting into it the second time.
I love that the friendly pirate was telling the story about the Dutch coming over on the ship. And then he's getting fed. This was the part that I really needed at this point in the story, and it really showed good pacing to me as well. I needed to know now that his food was being spiked. That was because I'm like, I can't believe Batman is just being broken down by starvation and these tactics. It doesn't fit the character for me. When we started to see that the food was being spiked, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're covering all bases. And I love that Batman acknowledges it. It's a very smart story in the sense that it doesn't take anything away from Bruce. Mm-hmm. You and I are both wrestling fans. We talk about the best wrestling superstars are the ones that know how to sell moves and stuff like that, and the ones that do it really well where both can do it. Nobody really loses anything in a match. Well, in this particular case, is a great example of where they're breaking down Bruce, but I never at any point in time lose any respect for Batman during this, which is something you've got to be very careful with. When you're breaking a man down like this, and I think it's something that's really important in comics, that if you're going to break down the main character, and it's a mistake that's made sometimes, if you break down a character, you've got to do it in such a way where, as readers, we want to see that character work their way back up. We want to believe that character can do it, that this character is really strong enough to get past all of these things. Because you find hope in there. Because we've all hit points in our life where we're at low points. Not necessarily because we go through anything on this level, but I mean, We've all had low points in our life. It can be anything from a bad day to a bad year to a bad month for whatever reason. Sometimes it's our fault. Sometimes it's outside sources. We've all had low points. But this is an inspirational comic where when you read this thing and you follow it all the way through by the end, you want to get picked up by it. And go, oh my gosh, if he can get through this, I can get through, yesterday's awful day at work or the bad phone call or something, you know what I mean? Those type of things. And that's one of these things where this story really moved me in that way, where I really just rallied behind Batman and was as he was going down, I was going down. When he started picking up, I started picking up. And I was glad the way that this pacing played out, that you had Jason Todd on this. And maybe this is why I connected with Jason Todd. Bruce was being so broken down that I started looking for people like Gordon and Robin to, kind of get me that strength that I need in this. Like, how is he going to get through all this? And they were kind of your positive points in all this. But the food thing was really important at that point. Because Bruce even shows here, it's been about 1 million years since I last ate. Huge exaggerations at this point, so we know where his mental state is. They feed me the bare minimum required to maintain life. No wonder there's a constant buzzing in my head. The food tastes rancid like wall paste. I'm beginning to think they're putting something in it. But now there's that pause. Might just be my imagination, though. Who cares? He's at that stage where he needs the sustenance so much that he's willing to take it in. And, that's where we start to see his will breaking down. And a lot of that's the drug. Along with your starvation, it's not just one thing. I think that's one of the things that really works for me on this. He wasn't broken down by one thing. We see later how he got captured. We'll talk about that more when we actually get there. But this man is in quite the state right now. And that's what made this moment possible.
I love how not only is the cult a training guide for brainwashing, but it's also a self-help book, too. It really, it's an invigorating, lifts you up kind of story. Oh, yeah. This book does it all, man. This is outstanding.
I do find this story, though, it does, by the end, you need that this could have ended in a way that would have gone horribly wrong. My attitude towards the story would have been quite different if it ended differently. It is one of those where I got to commend the pacing of the whole thing, because it really does take you down to the darkest possible places you can go with a Batman story in the middle, and then starts to gradually find spots to pick you back up. It really is a V. It goes to a complete V.
Oh, yeah.
It goes all the way down on one side, then all the way back up on the other. Again, we see
for victory.
Yeah, absolutely. We see another then sequence where he's flashing back through, and this is where we get to see him actually get shot. He's, again, with some thugs. He's taking advantage of the situation, and it's a situation where he went easy on them, and he paid the price. He was basically saying they're young, let me put the fear of God into them, and hopefully set them on the right path, which has been his M.O. Saying, I don't want to take it too far. Let me get them right to the point where, hopefully we can knock some sense into them, basically. The dude gets shot, and this actually allowed him to get pulled into the cult. Because he was shot, they killed the person who was coming after him. He got pulled into the sewer and put in his place. But again, adding in, this guy is going through all of this. That wrapping around him is because he was shot in a situation where he, in Blackfire's eyes, would have shown weakness. Blackfire's guys killed that guy, that same guy that Bruce went easy on.
Yeah, I thought this was a must-needed scene. I had to see how the heck did these guys get Bruce? Because, yeah, they got a good thing going here, but there was still always that missing piece for me that I needed answered. And it was really cool how this played out. As the lead up to it, I thought that was awesome how Bruce did get careless, but he also. Was it he got careless? Was it that he was too light on him? Was it too easy? What was the deal? But I kind of chuckled that the vendor that Bruce just saved didn't do anything to try to help him, but ran away, leaving the punks to finish him off. I thought that was a funny kind of moment and a, guess what, no good deed goes unpunished, Batman kind of deal.
His rescue also let the two other guys escape. Mm-hmm. The other two cohorts ran away. So it's funny for these guys trying to clean up the streets. They really let the other two bad guys go away, the initial accomplices.
Well, who knows down the line, maybe they had more of their people waiting. Those guys could have ran right into a group of the cult just sitting there waiting with some axes to go to town. And I thought it was kind of neat that you look at the shadows, you can see Ratface's shadow. So it looked like Ratface was one of the guys that saved Bruce.
Yeah, very true. Now, the funny part is looking over at Blackfire again, and you just see his behold the underworld empire, Batman. He's shown individuals now. Now he's showing them collective as a group. Bruce is at a point now where he's starting to connect with, geez, I was doing this by myself, look what happened to me. I was showing mercy, look what happened to me. On the other hand, if I was a part of this empire, this group, and would any of this have happened to me? He shows him that empire. And it welcomes him to be a part of it. And we see, this is, again, Bruce's mind opening up to flaws where maybe they aren't necessarily flaws. Because Bruce, actually, to me, Bruce is not killing. Bruce's being that man who won't is a strength. Because it's harder, it'd be easier to pull out a gun and start popping everybody. To take that step and hold to a code. And to maintain that sense of morality. When you're doing something as crazy as being a vigilante, to yet maintain that moral code, a lot of times without a lot of thanks, it shows a strength of character forming. It's something that I really dig about the character, and I love that is something that Blackfire is preying on. And we see him like with the kiss to the face again, and then just kind of really something you wouldn't see normally in a Batman comic happen to Batman, and just Bruce's lack of comfort to the whole thing, seeing. Like even the little bit of defiance still there in his face.
Yeah, and it was just a great way to introduce Blackfire. Well, we already knew Blackfire was the bad guy, but you look at the real timeline, a great way for Bruce to find out that it is Blackfire doing this. He comes out, very, that again, very pomp and circumstance kind of deal, that very positive, and it's all about being the charismatic leader. It's about having that presence. He's like, welcome to the underground, kind of like that whole just open and friendly, and this is the way you want to be. This is the people you want to hang out with. We're the cool table. You want to be here kind of deal.
Now, what's interesting to me at this point, and I was glad that they did this, I wanted to know, what's the outside world doing about it? I mean, it's Batman. Batman's got associates. He has Robin. He has Alfred. Why isn't anybody saying anything about him? We find out here. They are. They're searching for him. He's been gone a certain amount of time. Robin at this point has been like, okay, I need to get help. And he goes to naturally the most logical ally in Jim Gordon and trying to get and gather information. Again, showing Jason Todd has a detective bone in him in the sense that he's saying, we got to gather some clues and let's trade information because I don't have all the puzzle pieces and I need them to try and help. I really loved him in this sequence of events and the way Gordon worked with him here and his worry for his mentor. And it was through these sequences, I'm like, boy, this kid that I really didn't like is really well written here.
And again, it's like how I said before, you could throw Tim Drake into that role. I could very easily see Tim doing that, and maybe even Damon start to kind of, get to the point. He's not there exactly yet, but he's starting to get there to understand that it is about a team Batman kind of concept. It is about working with, the other parties, and, it's, I don't want to say I didn't want to say he called for backup, but it is about a group dynamic. I love seeing that, and again, it was just like that's cool. I'm glad to see Robin doing this. I'm glad to see Jason, doing this kind of stuff because again, it's definitely a plus, must see. And I really, really enjoyed seeing the patrol cars just driving along the empty streets of Gotham and just thinking how freaky it was to them.
Yeah. Because when you think about it, there comes a point where you sit there and say, okay, this place used to be packed. And yeah, it was, pimps, hooks, drug dealers, stuff like that, and other sordid hustlers. But doesn't there come a point where you start saying to yourself, is that going to happen to us? If all of them have been taken, will it stop? And they're right to think that. Because we see the way the story's going, and ultimately, I 100% believe they would be nuts not to worry about that because this cult wouldn't stop. They really wouldn't stop there. Unless these people actually conceded to joining and being a part of the cult, they would be next.
Oh, yeah, big time. And beat cops know their area. They know the streets. They know what they're patrolling, where the problems go down and whatnot. So the fact that they have that, connection to it was something I really enjoyed seeing. Cleveland, one of the problems that stinks about Cleveland is we do get ghost town syndrome a lot, especially like midweek, late in the evening. The city does kind of shut down. And if you've ever driven or walked down those streets, it does get freaky because you just see these tall buildings, and just empty, silent streets. And you're just like, okay, if anybody were to jump out right now and slit my throat, there would be no one who would see this. There'd be no other way for, no one would know until probably the next day, if that much kind of deal. And to have a city like Gotham get reduced to that level would just be downright just unnatural.
We see the drug dealer taken, but to me, the best bit here is, we were talking about good cop, bad cop before and how there was different people coming at Batman for different perspectives. And you're right, the pirate dude, definitely much more of a calming one. He's just a storyteller. And you're right, I'd feel very comfortable sitting around the fire with this guy, hearing his stories. You could probably talk to him for hours. You can tell that this fella, obviously a homeless dude who was on the street before, but he was probably the one that was telling all of them stories before, and that was probably his role. And that was a way that he maybe compensated and found some strength in himself, was to try and tell those stories, and that worked for him. Ratface is what he is. And, him coming in at that moment and just saying, hey, if this dude's not going to, just see our things our way, let's beat it out of him. And, again, bringing in the pain, Bruce is being hit on the sensory level from all directions. From everything being calm to what this guy did to him. And Blackfire's listening to it all. So, and that panel right there, that bottom right-hand corner panel with him sitting there with that walking stick of his, just listening to the screams, it shows right away what a manipulative person this guy is, the true sense of evil. And again, another great panel that lets us as the reader know he is the bad guy. Because it would be easy to kind of start going down the route, well, maybe Blackfire's like a new Punisher. Maybe he is trying to clean up the city and all that. Those panels instantly keep reminding us that, wait a minute, this dude isn't all, this dude is not above board. This dude is bad news. He's playing a very dangerous game here, and we're right to be wary. And I loved that about the story development, that it never for a second let up who the real villain is. And you were right when you said that before. We knew at those moments early on that this was the big bad because of the way this story was developed and the way the panels and what Batman was going through, the torment he was going through, was developed in such a way that we got to see all that. And that's what I loved about it from the get-go. I always felt this was Batman against an ultimate evil, an ultimate villain who really was preying on him in a way that we hadn't really seen at the time. And I remember in '89 thinking, I was like, woof. Wow, how's Batman going to get out of this? And that was what jaw-dropped this one for me right from the get-go. Did you have that experience in your initial... I know when you talked back initially, you were saying that years in the 90s when you read this, did you get that feeling that this was a really impressive bad guy?
Well, I don't know if I'd say a really impressive bad guy. I did see him as a big bad. I did like, eventually how this thing played out, where you do get some, villain, and you do see this guy as, a worthy villain of Batman. And so that for me was kind of a cool thing. But I didn't have the jaw-dropping, awe-inspiring kind of deal from him.
Ever?
Well,
and I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm actually genuinely asking it because I obviously did.
I never, the initial stuff, I didn't put him on like the Joker level kind of deal. I never really saw him and it's weird because he did break the bat. And I always thought that was cool that he was able to mentally break him down and mentally do that. But I never put him on the level of, like, say, as I said, Joker, or when Bane did it later on. I never really compared, him as them. Back then I didn't. Now I would. Now I would say, yes, this is that kind of villain. This is that same kind of villain who would do this, who could do this, who did do this. So it's kind of an interesting thing to see that it's happened. It can happen again. Maybe Bruce has learned from it. Maybe he has better defenses against it. It's one of those things where I'd like to see a round two.
Yeah, I would. Well, yes and no. And let me tell you why. I think one of the things, because I'm going to take back actually something I said earlier, where I said I wanted to see more of him, Blackest Night. I liked the nod to him. I liked his presence there. But actually, I think one of the things that I really liked about this story is he was really mainly used for this story. And, the way it ends, pretty final with him and Bruce.
Yeah.
And I think there's something that adds to the mystique of the character that it was contained within this story. I don't know that I'd like to see the Cult 2, for example, because I guess my fear would be, do we then lose what made him special in this? I don't know. I don't. It would be interesting to read it. Mm-hmm. My fear would be, in all honesty, I love this as a contained piece as it is, and sometimes stories don't need a sequel.
And it's when I say a round two, I'm not actually even thinking a return of Deke and Blackfire. We've kind of already had our round two with everything that he went through with R.I.P. kind of deal. Mm-hmm. That whole same. I'd like to see Bruce fight back against another mental after this had occurred.
Okay.
I'm not. Now, granted, Blackfire was cool, and if they, could figure out a way to bring him back, or if they could have brought him back, I would have definitely picked it up and seen it again. What would happen? But when I say round two, I like seeing just the people who psychologically tried to break the bat.
I agree. I like that it wasn't just mental, though.
Oh, no. And you can't just do it mentally. You got to use a little bit of drugs. You got to use the physical stuff. You got to catch him when he's at his weakest. Physically, and then mentally, and then emotionally. And then eventually you can start, kind of manipulating the story in his head. You can start, just doing little tweaks and doing little changes here. It was definitely a cool, way to do it.
You actually read about R.I.P. being round two of sorts with the mental attack. It actually took it further because in R.I.P. they really were trying to mentally destroy him. Mm-hmm. I mean mentally completely destroy him. Not in the sense of, in this case, because I think Hurt wanted to use him like as a servant or a slave or what, however he was trying to determine it at that point. He was trying to do it. But I don't get the sense, I think Blackfire really wanted him on his side. And just to keep, the treatments going and to keep him on his side as somebody that he could use physically. I don't know that Hurt would have tried to use him in the way that Blackfire was.
No, Hurt definitely didn't want to make him one of his agents. He wanted to destroy him, defeat him, and have him be his little puppy dog,
Right.
and, just completely just have him at that, beck and call, kind of completely in control of him, but not one of his, minions. Blackfire wanted Batman to be his guy. He wanted Blackfire to stay. Blackfire. It's an ego thing with him. He wanted Batman to say to him, "Yes, sir, you're the man. I got your back, boss," kind of deal. And so definitely two different, two different kind of villains, but not even just two different villains. Two different, motivation behind it. For Hurt, it was a really more personal attack against Bruce. Blackfire wanted the power. He wanted the control. And to do that, he had to take Batman out. And this is how he takes Batman out.
I think let's jump in between the two segments with Isidro and Sally, and then maybe jump back to some of the stuff in between if we want to chat about it, because they really go hand in hand. We see this sequence with a pimp where they're hunting him down and trying to make sure it's the right pimp. They bring up the name Sally, and when he finally confirms that it is in fact the right person, they take him out, and we find out later why. Blackfire, again, was using this as a way not only to get Sally under his control, but also, I firmly believe he was using this as saying, wow, this is a great example of, look here what I've done. Look what was done to her. She's now become the perfect example for anybody, not just Batman, as a why you should join me. This is the kind of injustice that goes on in this world. Look what happened to her. Is this something we should let continue? And this Isidro guy, what are we going to do? Put him in jail, rehabilitate him, and let him back out on the streets? What possible benefit can that serve? We executed him. And isn't that what should happen for a guy like this? And I love now we're getting deeply philosophical between the two of them. He's gotten Bruce to the point where his mind is opened enough that he can actually have a real debate with him. Whereas normally Batman, there would be no tolerance for this. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't be talking about this. It would be, you're wrong. And that's it.
Yeah, this was a great sequence with the pimp, because they really taught him, a lesson in how to actually treat a lady. And, it was just a really cool line, even, as they're talking to him, they're verifying this is the right guy, like, yeah, what's she want? Righteous vengeance. And I was like, ooh, that's a cool line. And you just get that great look of the cult members' faces. You see the multiple panels with just a flash of the weapon, and this is going to end very poorly for Isidro. And again, then back to with Blackfire and Batman debate. I loved how Bruce was at that point where he was so weakened that he tried to make his argument, but the lettering kind of really, they shrunk it down. You could see it was a weak argument. You see it didn't have a lot of passion and fire behind it, and Blackfire just keeps going on, making this great solid argument. It's, one of the biggest things that anybody involved in law enforcement hates is the revolving door of justice, and how sometimes these guys get a slap on the wrist, they're out on the street, and they're just doing it all over again. And that's, the big bane to the existence of anybody who tries to put these guys down. And that has to be something that eats away at Bruce every day. The fact that if somebody he busts, somebody he takes down, they're going to be back out. They're going to do it again. So what's Blackfire do? Not only shows this sweet, innocent girl who, she made some bad choices in her life, but did she deserve this? Did she deserve to get her eye cut out, to get her finger cut off? She's kind of got that half Joker smile kind of deal with the scar on her face. Did she really deserve this? This is a human being. How could you do this? This is an animal who did this. We executed him. I thought, I was just eating it up, and I'm like, yes, this is right here. These are the standard arguments that people give on, being tougher on crime, on increasing the death penalty, on all this stuff that where anybody says this is where the justice system slips up. This is the cracks that people slip through. Pieces of garbage like this, pimp, are who kind of, takes advantage of the system, takes advantage of the overcrowded prisons, and gets released early just to do it all over again. I really just ate up how, he was going at it. He was working Bruce. Again, nice solid build. He sees his opening, he goes for it, and he goes in for the kill. I ate this stuff up.
The needle on the ring was really important to me because, again, it reinforces for us as the reader that this idea that Blackfire's spitting at him, this idea, the spin that he's putting on his way of operating, is not something Blackfire truly believes in. Because if you have true conviction, you don't need to poison somebody to make them see your way. You believe that firmly, you're so strong in your belief that you believe that, hey, I'm in the right. This is something where my argument is unbreakable, unshakable. And if we keep debating this, they're going to have to see my way because it's truly right. He knows he's not. And not even that he knows he's not. He doesn't care. It's not about being right in his argument. It's about getting all these people under his control so he can be the leader. So they follow him and his way of doing things. It's anything he is saying to them, any type of mystique he's building around himself, is really to have them worship him in a way where he could be the ultimate leader in Gotham. He can own the city. He wants this to become a new kind of state with him as their dictator, their god. Mm-hmm. And he's willing to do all of these things to just keep increasing that. And just when he tapped him in the back of the neck there, I loved seeing, talk about the great artwork, the visual when he took him to that totem. We saw earlier how small the totem actually is in relation to the cave. But then when Bruce sees it due to hallucinations, it's larger than life. It's enormous, overpowering, looking down on him like, oh my gosh, who could have even constructed that? And it just seems to get bigger every time, every panel that we see it in during that sequence, where it's almost growing and the eyes are glowing. It's an amazing sequence there where I thought visually, seeing Bruce's awe and shock to the whole thing, where he's like, yes, I
believe.
I see. Oh. And Blackfire's like, take him away, he's been converted. And it was just such a staged breaking of a man that I just thought visually that just played out so well to me. Because just seeing it on Bruce's face, right down to the way that his mouth was structured and the teeth and just that whole sequence, I felt for him. I felt scared for him. And I'm just kind of like, no, you got to see through this. You got to fight past what this guy did to you. This dude just tapped you in the back of your neck. Isn't there enough of you left to feel that? And knowing that it wasn't. And that was the one thing where I never lost respect of Batman through all this, which is a danger when you do this. You could really make a reader lose respect for the portrayal of Batman, which I think once you've done that in a Batman story, you're done. Because I've got to respect the guy. You know what I mean? Yeah. He makes mistakes. Sometimes his interpersonal relationships with his teammates and stuff like that, he makes mistakes and things like that, and those are flaws, character flaws in him that you expect. But I still never lose respect for him because ultimately, when he realizes those things, he starts to correct them a little bit. He takes steps to correct them, and you know that that's a huge journey for him. But with something like this, where we're talking about criminals and actually seeing their side of things and seeing Batman come around to that. You've got to do it in such a way where I'm not losing respect for Bruce, and this accomplished that in a deep, deep level.
Yeah, and it's, I'd really, you're talking, just as you're talking, I'm like, amen, 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 testify, because that whole sequence, that whole final sequence when, he really moves in for the kill, and it's, he's beyond, systems are weakened. He's beyond he's gone to that level where, you can't fight back. It's, everybody has a breaking point in some point in time. It's that, that state where the mind wants peace, and so the mind is going to start, accepting what it wouldn't normally accept, just so it can have peace of mind, just so it can have that rest, just so it can have that moment where everything makes sense, even though subconsciously it knows it's not true. Sometimes it knows that this is the wrong way to go, but here's the easy way. It's a lot of times tortured victims, POWs would talk about just they had that moment where of kind of peace in the pain and the agony where they just accepted fate, where they just accepted where it was, and you get kind of like institutionalized and you become accepting of your surroundings and you're no longer fighting them kind of deal. And that's where Bruce is going through, but you add on to it not just that part of the brainwashing, he's got the whole chemical side of it. He's got the the hallucinogenic ordeal going on with with the ring, with the food that he's being fed. And dig when he's walking to the totem, just how the way they did the color schematics and just what Bruce was seeing, where you could just really see he was completely tripping on something. He had some good stuff going on, and he was just like, whoa, kind of, you kind of got that dun, 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 kind of theme going through my head as he's just looking around, and it was just a really cool, like, wow kind of moment. And seeing that totem come alive, it was, that great, it's a great smile on his face. Whenever Bruce Wayne as Batman smiles, it's usually a bad thing. Uh-huh. And just he had that smile on his face, and then I was like, "Ooh, this is not good."
Finding hope in Blackfire, which was we don't want that. No. I want to jump back to the police real quick. That one sequence, I love seeing Sergeant DeLeon and Commissioner Gordon and Robin in that sequence where, again, we're seeing police work going on. The police aren't just... And it's really important to me that the Gotham Police Department is not portrayed as incompetence. I don't mind when they portray there's corruption within the police department, but I also, Jim Gordon is going to be smart enough that he's got good cops on the payroll as well. In a corrupt town as corrupt as Gotham is, you're going to hire some bad eggs, but there's also some good ones in that batch too. And that was something I really enjoyed in this sequence, to see some real solid police work where they're fact-finding and finding that the crooks missing are being actually reported by other crooks who are so, at this point, distraught, they're going to the police for help. And that's scaring Commissioner Gordon, I think, more than anything else, or, what kind of world are we in right now where the crooks are coming to us? And what does that mean? And then from that, we get to see the reaction of the citizens to all this.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that I was, kind of chuckling as this was going down, and then as you start seeing Gordon's just the way he's dealing with, like, it's something's coming. This is the, one of those sign of apocalypse kind of deals, because the crooks don't go to the cops, because what are they going to say? While I was selling my drugs, someone came after me. No, you can't do that. You can't go to the cops. You can't go to the police. And think about all the nasty stuff with all these supervillains, with all the different, drug cartels, with the families, with the Joker, Penguin, all the weird kind of villains that Gotham have. The crooks never went to the police. Here we have a situation where they're like, guys, help, please. I was like, wow, that you start thinking the big picture of what is Gotham, and that's definitely a moment where you're going, this isn't good.
We see the people, and it actually is a sad commentary on society in general, how people will leap on bandwagons without total information. Like, the one line for me, I was like ready to reach in and smack the guy. Whoever's responsible for this situation has my vote. Your vote for what? You're ready to hand this guy the keys to whatever just because of the fact that people are being killed? What is their reasoning behind it? What is their philosophy? Are they killing people because they're trying to take over the turf because it's a rival gang? How do you know you really want this? What is the end goal? And I honestly thought, it's not in any way, shape, or form taken away from the writing. If anything, I think it's a strength of the writing. I'm like, this is true. There are people dumb enough that they would really do that.
Yeah, people would definitely jump on the bandwagon, definitely look at it, because a lot of times, and to be honest, I'm not even going to knock people for who would do that, because you get sometimes when you're in a situation where there is no hope, there's nothing good going on. You live in a neighborhood where every night you hear gunfire, and every night someone's dying, and it's not you, it's not your family, so you're happy, and all of a sudden, the bad stuff starts going away. And you start getting that moment of peace. And if you don't sit there and look beyond, if you don't look like, 3 steps beyond, you're not going to see that it's something bad doing this. You're just going to see that initial circle around you. You're just going to see that initial thing say, hey, my family didn't die. Hey, my people who were all honest, no one tried to kill us. No one tried to rob us. Hey, this is okay. This is kind of good. And it's, a definite statement on, society and just people in general. And that was something that I really digged, first time reading, and then especially this time going through, because, it's that whole power corrupts absolutely kind of deal where you see the other shoe fall, where you see it coming down and you're just like, ooh, this is, guess what? Things are about to change really quickly. And I like just seeing that, social commentary on society. It's a very realistic, and as much as I'd like to blast people for it, I can't. I honestly, if I was in that situation, I could see myself probably doing that. I'd like to think I'd have a little bit of, because I have a little bit of professional skepticism on anything. So I'd like to think, okay, I wouldn't be completely like, hoorah, this is wonderful. But I would start going, hey, this isn't a bad deal. Honest people are safe. Hey, that's kind of cool.
It's funny when you put it in that perspective, though, of talking about a city. I guess I haven't lived in a city with no hope like that. But when you laid it out that way, it was funny. I'm like, you're 100% correct, and that is Gotham. There's a lot of the citizenry that are like, hey, I've lived here my whole life. It's my family lives here. I've lost people here. Now all of a sudden we have an opportunity where somebody is getting rid of the undesirables. And they're cleaning things up, and it seems safe to go out again. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. I really liked the police sequences early on because I feel that they probably have the opportunity to be the most objective in their relationship with Batman, knowing what it's like in the city, knowing where the strengths are and the weaknesses are, and what really is going on, where they were scared by what was happening. And that was something that terrified them to get out of the area. And then we see citizens who maybe don't have that insight in that whole story having a very different reaction. And I don't know that all of them would agree with this, but it was interesting to see that climate survey and how the news media would do that. And I do want to say again, I totally think that was accurate. But it was only the one guy. The other people, as they were talking, it didn't bother me as much. But that one guy, as far as giving him my vote, I agree with you in the sense that I might say, well, geez, the situation worked out in such a way where it is good for us. But to sit there and they don't even know at this stage who's behind it. Like, they don't know yet it's Deacon Blackfire. They haven't heard him speak. They don't know what the real motivation is behind this. And comments like that where people are just saying, hey, yeah, hoorah, that person gets my vote. I always like to reach in and smack those people versus the people that are saying the streets are safer and things like that, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
There's a huge difference, I think, between a lot of what you were laying out there and that guy saying he gets this, whoever's behind this gets this vote because you don't know who it is.
Yeah, how can you say that? Yeah.
But we see Deacon Blackfire with that confidence. And this is the sequence right here where we finally get to see the harsh reality of Blackfire's world. What gives anybody the right to sit there and judge a person completely and totally to the point where you're going to execute a person for mistakes they've made in their life? We've got this artist here who is, again, kind of going off of what you were saying earlier, doing what he needs to get by, okay? He doesn't consider himself a criminal. Being a bagman for the numbers runner ain't a big deal. He's trying to do, forgetting about the legalities of what he does. He's trying to do the minimum of the low in order to get by so then he can hopefully achieve his dream of being an artist. Admirable, his dream. His method, he's taking an easy way. I don't know if there is a hard option for him where obviously there might not be. He may have tried other things. We don't know his whole story. But see, that to me even added and made it more compelling. The fact that if we don't know his story, I guarantee you these guys coming out of the sewer and killing him don't. They killed this guy. And what was he doing? Running numbers.
Yeah.
It's this poor artist who really was all he was trying to do. And I love that this is a comic book artist. But this comic book artist that they kill, all he was guilty of doing was running numbers. Should he go to jail for that? Those are different things to argue. But to be killed for what he did?
Yeah, I'm an advocate. I'm strongly in favor of the death penalty. But even I think there's, that the punishment must fit the crime. And running numbers, yes, it is illegal. But it's one of those crimes that I would just look beyond. Because I'm like, it's not... it's not like this is, a major piece of garbage scumbag. This is definitely over just overkill for the crime. It doesn't fit. It's a lot of people will argue about like when numbers really first started getting, the whole number racket kind of got defeated by the lottery and by legalized casino gambling appearing everywhere. It's something that it was one of the reasons that people used to say, the government only doesn't want this because they're not getting their piece of the action kind of deal. So a lot of people could very easily and have and do look the other way with stuff like this. For Blackfire's people to just flat out kill them, that's going beyond. Now, the one thought that I did enter, and I'm not 100% sure which way it goes. Did Blackfire order this execution? We later see that Ratface has some issues with African American people, that maybe this wasn't a Blackfire authorized hit. Maybe it was Ratface kind of going off on his own, doing what he wants.
See, I don't think Blackfire cares who they hit. I think as long as they're doing it in a group and they're going after criminals, he doesn't care, as long as they're going for the purpose of cleaning up the streets. Mm-hmm. I do think that this is authorized, quote-unquote authorized, in the sense that it fits under the Blackfire banner. Ratface's deal wasn't about cleaning up the streets, it was about revenge. And that doesn't necessarily... And when I say it was revenge, it was about personal gain and personal revenge versus personally cleaning up the streets, which is a huge difference than what they did with the girl who was beat up earlier, where it was still about cleaning up the streets from a pimp who could, not only for what he's doing as a pimp, but for a pimp who did the horrible thing that he did to her. What happened with Ratface's case, he was going after somebody because he didn't like who they were with, not that they were doing something criminal. Mm-hmm. Which I think is a huge distinction from this moment with the comic book artist. The numbers thing is a criminal. He's committing a crime. So I think Blackfire would have been okay with this, in the sense that it fits under his banner of cleaning up crime in Gotham. So I do think there's a distinction between the Ratface thing. I do. I think that because that totally was because Ratface doesn't like who the person was dating, and I don't think that would fit into Blackfire's whole MO. It skirts off of it and actually tarnishes a bit of what Blackfire's doing, which is why it was such a concern later. We'll have to talk about that when we get to that one, but we get to see Jake with Blackfire at these moments, and it's interesting how Blackfire really needs the confidant. And this did lead me to believe that a lot of the supernatural stuff that was mentioned earlier with him is really any of that is in Blackfire's past story is only because either Blackfire put that there or because drugs allowed anybody to see that as it being the case with him. And it was really kind of a grim way to end this story, but really seeing that he right now is going after Gotham. He's laid this out. We've seen Batman broken. And the issue ends with him saying that is the prize that I've got here. I'm finally, after all this time, all these lifetimes, what do you say, 12 lifetimes or something like that?
Yeah.
It's time for me to own Gotham. And it was really a compelling ending to the first issue. And it is something where and that skyline shot there, I think, is just really, really sharp, both in the pencil work and, again, in the color. Because look at this, the way that I guess it would be like a sunset on the red waters of Gotham, but it almost looks blood red. And with how dark this story got, it's very fitting to what Blackfire's been doing. And I really dug that.
Yeah, I really like the fact that Jake was having some issues about Batman. He was worried about Batman because Batman is a dangerous enemy. And, you see, Blackfire saying, he's converted, kind of that whole arrogance that he has. That I thought that was a cool moment, seeing just the initial kind of, chipping away, not even chipping away, just kind of a understanding a little bit of Jake that, he is more of a free thinker. He's not a drugged zombie, in the mix. He may be a converted and he may be a believer, but there is, something there of actually he's going to keep an eye on things. And I thought that was kind of cool because whenever you get somebody who's converted, whenever you get somebody who's brainwashed, you can always have a crisis of faith, and that person can turn on you. And Jake recognizes that Batman, they should be worried. They should, be concerned and monitor him closely.
I also get the impression that Jake, all along, his whole reason for being there was because he saw the potential for Blackfire to actually be able to accomplish what he's after, and Jake was waiting for the opportunity to take over himself. when the time was right. There's an ambition to Jake that you always feel is part of the undercurrent there, that yes, he follows Blackfire and he's very content to be his right-hand man, but he's also very often throughout this making his own power plays where people know that he is more of an authority figure than the rest. He's set aside from the rest. He's not one of the other followers. And he's definitely above Ratface.
Yeah. Jake's the right hand. Jake's his man.
And that was something that I found interesting throughout it. I understood Blackfire's reasoning for going after Batman so strong, though. This is a strong political move for him. And to have Batman clearly under his control and to be a part of this group would be something that, if Batman endorses him, it actually starts to break down the political structure in Gotham. And more importantly, people's faith in the political structure of Gotham. If Batman is against the police force, who's been previously corrupt, and this is brought up later in the series, well, what does that mean about the police force? Are they corrupt again? And maybe is the only person we can trust Blackfire, because Batman's allied himself with him, right? It seems to be that way. That's the rumors that we're hearing from the streets. So, what's going on with the Gotham City Police Department? And I love that there's actually a motivational reason. Like, why wouldn't Blackfire just kill Batman? Well, because he's a far more powerful ally, not just in the physical sense, because he's got the numbers on his side. So does he really need Batman for that? Not really, but as a symbol. And Blackfire, clearly, from the way he operates, recognizes the power of symbols, is using this symbol, or you were going to see him use this symbol, to his advantage. And that was something that in the later read-throughs, going back and seeing this series again, understanding why Batman was so important to Blackfire as a person to have as an ally, or as you said, more of a convert, which is way different than an ally, was something that I found very interesting to see once you know where the story goes. Great first issue.
Oh, yeah.
Hope this craft can withstand this powerful force.
Jim, Batman the Cult issue 2, Capture. I remember the cover for this one with Bruce's hands chained up, crossed over like that, because I have the original issues downstairs, and I did use for reading this for this particular podcast, the newer version of the trade that's come out. But I remember that being the full cover, and just how powerful that was, because it symbolized like the weakness that we saw him in the first issue, and that was something where it's funny to read this story now with having the whole complete piece together and to try and remember what it was like with the individual issues, because things like Dark Knight Returns, I had that issue too, because I remember I'm like, boy, Dark Knight Returns, I read that originally and waited in between episodes of that. So it's funny now how it's one of the things I really do love about trade collections is that people get a chance to experience these complete tales right away with everything immediate and right there. Yet, to a certain extent, they don't get to feel the drama of waiting that 30 days for the next issue to come in. Because that's something I do like about the serial. Like, could I ever go to completely the trade? No. I love trades for just this reason. I love reading stories like this, because there's a lot of books I've bought in trade that I didn't read initially when they came out, and I love reading those storylines. But there's something about the drama that a writer and an art team build, specifically for the purpose of leaving you with a cliffhanger that keeps you thinking for 30 days. And that's what I did with this series. So after issue 1, there was that wait in between where you read the issue 1 a couple of times, and then you thought about what was happening, and then you got issue 2 in there, and you had some notions in your head without knowing where the story was going to go, of how it was going to play out. Could you ever see yourself going to the point where you waited for the trade for everything?
I don't think so. Not for everything. I'm in agreement with you on the fact that there is something about that. That must get it every month, wait for that, and keeping up on it kind of deal, where there are some titles I would never go to just trade because that's too long of a wait. I got some stuff that I'm able to do it on, and it sometimes is kind of hard because I had so much fun with the last time I read it that I want to jump on the next issue, and I wanted to say, I'll just, make up where I left off and kind of deal. And I start thinking about mismatching things and just mixing it up. But yeah, it can be tough. And it's funny because with the cult here, I've never had a period where I didn't read this when it came out, so I had, never had to wait between each issue. I could sit down and read the next one and read the next one and kind of go through that way. So it's, while though I understand what you go through with the current stuff, but with this one, man, I could see it, my present day, if this was a present day story coming out, this would drive me nuts. That waiting that 30 days going, no, I want to know.
But see, I think that's something that's, and that isn't a knock on anybody. I know we have listeners who definitely wait for the trade, and I'm not knocking you for doing that. You genuinely enjoy that experience. I'm just sharing what my experience is with comics and what I enjoy. I like reading stories serialized. I like the 30-day wait. I like the build, because writers create and craft the issues with that in mind. So there's cliffhangers left to make you think and wonder in between. We just talked last episode about Birds of Prey and how much we enjoyed that initial opening arc of this new series for the speculating, trying to figure out who White Canary was, even though we were off. But I mean, that was the fun for me also as well, was that the author crafted that story in such a way that in between that time, you're supposed to be thinking about those things and speculating. And she played with our heads a little bit with some of the clues that she laid out there, and some of the things she did, especially with Savant and Creote. But that's something I like, and I really enjoy that aspect of the serialized storytelling. And that's something, there are series that I do read in trades. Some of the Vertigo titles that I get, I read in trade now, just because I find that I was stockpiling them anyway, so I just buy them in trade and then just read them that way. Not because I don't like them, or, if I had more time and I was able to read them monthly, I would, but I wouldn't drop the title. I like getting them then in the trade format, so I have them. But it is something that I would miss from a majority of my titles because of the fact that I like just that. I do like the 30-day. Maybe it's the sadistic part of me that likes that 30-day wait. I don't know.
You like torturing yourself, don't you? Huh?
I do. But it is. I think that's built in there. The anticipation is built in by my favorite writers, I should say. They're the ones where those titles, I would never consider doing it because of... And even, it's funny, your Jonah Hexes and series like that, there is something where even with a very satisfying story, you wait for the next issue wondering what the creative team's going to throw at you next. And anyway, back to this story. This whole Two-Face sequence in the beginning, where I feel this is Batman's mind working against what's happening to him. Because he's being put again into this scenario where, like he was with the Joker, killing one of his main villains in his mind. And then he starts making the connection because Harvey Dent was really somebody who's connected to first through the police force. And that connection leads him right back to then Jim Gordon. And it is his mind, I guess, compensating for this alien invasion of, the drugs and these foreign thoughts that are out of character for him, trying to make some sense of what he's seeing. Why haven't I done this before? Why haven't I killed Two-Face? Well, because now he's got to subconsciously dig in deep and say, what are the connections that I have with this guy besides just the fact that he's a villain? Well, this leads me back to law enforcement. This leads me back to reminders of Jim Gordon, who this man once was, and things like that. I loved this opening because we do see Batman's mind has not completely given up. It's still fighting in spite of everything he's been hit with. And it was a great way to open up this issue because as a reader, I want hope. I want to see my hero in there still on some level, even if it's minute. And this is minute, but he's there. And I liked that.
Oh, big time. And just one of the things that I digged in this fight sequence, while Bruce isn't himself, there are still parts of him that are just second nature. Especially when it comes to combat, when it comes to evading enemy attacks, and just this stuff that, he's drilled it into his head so to the point that it becomes where he's able to do it on autopilot when his brain isn't 100%, when he's exhausted, or when he's, taking a shot to the head, or some kind of, thing that would make him off kilter. His body naturally reacts to it. It's the muscle memory of how to fight, how to use, what kind of tactics you use on a situation like this. And I thought that was just a really really cool to see that side of him. And then, as you said, you see his mind kind of try to fight back. It's that subconsciousness giving him that shot, that slap to the face, kind of splash cold water on him, just to bring him out of it, saying, hey, you're not killing Two-Face. This is Gordon. This is someone you would never hurt. This is something you would never do. This is not you. Wake up, kind of deal. And I love just seeing that kind of play out. We talked last time, with the first issue, that we wanted to see Bruce get broken, but not to the point that we lose respect for him. Here's another point where, once again, we're seeing a controlled Batman, but there is still the man there. There is still something. He's still fighting, even if it's right now on the subconscious level. And eventually he can work through that. He can come back and he can take back the prize. He can take back who he is. So we're going to see a return of Batman. We're going to see Bruce back in control. And I thought that was just a cool way to show us, yes, he's still there. He's coming out and he's going to come out swinging.
Was that pirate dude without the badge getting the gun pulled on his head? And without the patch, not the badge, the patch on his eye. Was that him without that?
I don't know.
Because if you look at the face, isn't that him? It sure looks like him. I'm talking about in the sequence where Batman's watching the nightmare, because he withdrew into himself, maybe as a way to compensate for the horrors going on around him. And then when he comes back to, it is one of the homeless guys getting the gun pulled on him. It looks a lot like the dude that was telling the pirate story before without the patch. The only reason why I'm even asking that is there's actually a point to this. Was the patch thing then a ruse to pull Batman into the story?
It does look like him. It looks a lot like him, but I don't know, because... that could just be another, big bearded pirate face guy, non-eye patch guy. It could
right.
be, there a lot of homeless, have that kind of look with the big unkept beard. So that could just be another guy.
It's interesting, though, that he tries to act because he can't just stand idly on the sidelines. And we do see him there. Like you said, I echo you completely. I'm now one of them, but I can't just stand by. I've got to act, must. And in acting, he actually causes the death of the guy by causing the distraction. So he tried to stop death, and he didn't kill the guy, but the distraction, because of his weakened state and all that, actually caused the other guy, the one with the gun, to die. And it's interesting to see the horror in that moment of the blood on his gloves. It was interesting how Bruce is starting to realize, I need food. Because this whole thing, their cleanup crew is going on at this point in time, where they're taking the bodies back for Blackfire, but it's not enough. He sees the food and he's like, I need food. This is something where it's his mind. He knows how long since I've eaten. This will help me clear my head. This will help get me back on track. He is realizing that there's something wrong here. It's those survival tactics, like you said, that are ingrained in him. Things that he just naturally knows to do. And I loved that bit because you would eventually get to the point where you'd say, whoa, wait a minute, I need to... kind of clear my head, and because I'm not feeling right. And he doesn't like Jake because of that. Yeah,
I'm liking seeing the emotional reactions that we're getting in Bruce. You mentioned it in the last issue, how you got to see some, while he's in the cowl, some emotional reactions. Throughout this whole opening sequence, we're seeing him go through a lot of stuff with, when they're showing them all the underworlders attacking, he's kind of coming out of it. They had that multiple page spread that was heavy red tint, a lot of carnage. You see just action, boom, 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 here and here. And then every so often you'd get a single panel of Bruce's face, just that kind of shock look. And then even going on, when he sees the food, there's a reaction. We're seeing a different side of Batman, and and it's again one of those kind of moments where you're like, wow, Batman he's not his normal self, and he's still fighting the influence. He's still strongly sedated, and he's still under control, but he's fighting it. And it's just a cool thing to see, the battle going on, and it's kind of like you start putting yourself in his mind, seeing where he's going, what's he doing with this. He's like, food. And even he says, food, he reiterates the training, food weakens the spirit, but Bruce doesn't care because he still reaches for it because he still needs it. And Jake's right there, and it's, again, part of brainwashing is also reinforcement of it. And Jake is right there to reprimand him, remind him, reinforce him of what is the preaching, what is the gospel kind of deal. I thought that whole sequence there, great, just emotional roller coaster that Bruce was on.
The detective, again, when we're back in the sewers, asking questions about the Deacon. Where is he? What's behind this door? Things, obviously, that Jake doesn't want him to know, but stuff that Batman as a detective would analyze. And I love that even in this weakened mental state, there's those elements still surfacing and we're still seeing him. This issue was something I really needed after how dark the first issue was. This issue's still very dark as well. But I really needed these moments of seeing glimpses of my hero, knowing that, like, you know, this guy can work his way through it. It's going to take a heck of a lot, and this is not going to be an easy journey. It's going to be a bumpy ride, but his mind is strong enough to get past it, whereas these other people are hopelessly lost into Blackfire and what he's done. And I loved, that was the thing we were joking around at the beginning about how this story could start to get a little inspirational. When Bruce fights his way through this and his mind starts to come beyond it, it really did. I remember reading this thing. It was like, man, no matter how low you get, it's not this bad. I can get past anything if this guy can beat this. You know, life's just not, people have a bad hair day. This dude's got more than that.
Oh, yeah.
And it was something that I really liked about this story was that it really takes, and I think that there's something that's inspirational about that when a hero's taken to their darkest place and they dig back up slowly. It wasn't bam overnight. It wasn't, wow, Batman was pulling a ruse or anything like that. He really was taken here. None of this was him hiding out or, pretending to be one of them. He genuinely went through this.
Yeah, the comeback for Bruce is at really cool moments. And I really did dig Jake throughout this, these sequencing, because he recognizes that kind of glimmer of life in Bruce as he starts questioning things, as he starts asking about, the Deacon, about the room. He's looking at his inner chambers, and he's kind of got that little bit of his old self back. And again, Jake's got to kind of reprimand him again, telling him to reflect on, the grace of Deacon Blackfire, and just kind of that reiterate and kind of keep control and, refortify that control they have over Bruce. And I thought that was, just another, I like seeing that Jake isn't the mindless, drone. He is actually a thinking guy. He is part of the deal. He's, he is, as we said before, a higher level than Ratface. He's got, he knows a little bit more about the situation than other people do.
Great marriage of art and text here. Part of me wants to strike out. It would be fun knocking out a few of Jake's teeth, but I don't do it. The Deacon's words have reached me. I have been converted. I have seen the truth. Then silence. I mean, there is silence. He's sitting there on the edge thinking. And we see him looking at the water, looking at the drops of the water. And it's really for 3/4 of the page. You see this. Then on the next page, so why do I feel so lousy? It's like something's broken inside me. Seems hard to think it shouldn't be like this. And I love that, because this is these moments where he's really analyzing, if on the surface this is how I feel and seems so logical to me, then why internally am I feeling like something's wrong? What is shouldn't I be comforted now? Shouldn't I be at peace? Because I've been converted, I see the light, I'm here. Why am I not? I love that. That was just one of those great moments where people sometimes don't have the courage to face that and really look at it. A lot of times they'll lash outwardly because of those internal feelings and dismiss it. He doesn't do that. And I love this. It was just something that I thought was just very powerful.
And I really liked, we can see where, as Bruce is going through this, we can see the brainwashing kind of fighting his mind and holding on to it. When he starts thinking about, his goal to save Gotham. Well, Blackfire has the same goal. He wants to save Gotham. He's the chosen one. The totem told me this. He is chosen to save Gotham. Maybe it's his way that's right. And then as he starts doubting Blackfire, he remembers, hey, to doubt Blackfire is damnation in the Hellfires. And then he remembers that burning sensation he had. Wait, was that a hot poker? No, it wasn't. My mind, it's not clear, and it's the memory isn't there, and but it's still that kind of, you see the programming telling him, damnation, fire, remember the burn. Even though it was that hot poker, well, now he's dismissing it as an actual burn in faith kind of stuff. And I thought that was just a cool way to see the brainwashing techniques, the mind control that they used on him coming back and fighting his logical mind. And again, another marriage of art, and just when he's talking about how his head is filled with cotton and he has these hit moments that are just, his brain is fuzzy. Seeing that ivy, the thorny ivy and that kind of like dragon type thingy going around his head, and just throughout that sequencing, I thought that was just some really cool stuff.
I really thought that the color artist and really the artwork on this one, the pencil work, really just went so well together to build a really horrifying sequence. This is something that really is a testament, I think, to the series. It's a horror story. It really is a Batman horror story. And Bernie Wrightson is known for doing this kind of tale artistically. And it really was, I think the script really played up to his strengths in those moments. Ratface showing up, where we get to see Ratface from Batman's perspective. Like, we see him at first in his, tattered, like, kind of homeless remains and that type of thing. But then we see Ratface from Batman's perspective in different outfits, especially the angel one, where he's kind of an angel of the god. And, as God's messenger, he's following along with this guy. And Ratface is using him for his own purpose. We find out real quickly that, Ratface is painting a picture for Batman of something that's not legit, of a guy who's really just filling up his trunk and not doing anything wrong at all. It looks like the guy's getting ready to, leave town?
Well, I kind of took it that maybe he was taking, the groceries or something like that. He was just, doing his thing. There was nothing, wrong with this guy. And I like later we find out what his true, reason why Ratface didn't like the guy. I thought that was just just again another sign into the evil, if you will, of Ratface and just this whole program. And then I kind of chuckled that this bad guy really saved Bruce and saved Batman. Had he not pulled them away to do this special mission for the Deacon, who knows what would have happened? Because, Blackfire, and Jake, they're getting ready to, re-inject and, re-strengthen, the drugs that are in Bruce, to keep him under control. And it's kind of Ratface to the rescue.
Well, it's one simple mistake from somebody with their own agenda has thrown off the overall goals. Blackfire clearly put too much faith in Ratface, and he shouldn't have done that. Because it's the one wild card in their organization that has now cost them dearly. And I agree with you. I loved that moment, that it was a simple mistake that Batman was able to then clear his head enough because of this sequence. I did like that with that moment with Ratface, where when he's going after the police officer, Batman sees him in a very different light. Sees him as this like evil beast coming after the police officer and goes to knock him out. But he's so stuck in between two worlds at this point, Blackfire's world and who he is at his core, that he also turns out and knocks out the police officer, which I loved because it really showed a man who is coming out of it but not there.
Yeah, and it's, the one thing I thought, again, it's death that does help pull Bruce back. When Ratface initially kills the guy, Bruce is like, wait, stop. But he can't, he's not strong enough to stop it. When the police officer shows up and is like, hey, I know what murder is, buddy. It's that murder is like, is that snapback to Bruce. And he's able to actually save the cop this time. But, as we said, he lashed out. Just that basic survival instincts, that basic just kind of animalistic nature where he's not 100%, so he's going to kind of go down to his base common denominator and just start swinging at anything. So I like seeing the fight back, but it's still not completely, there yet. He's got a way to go. He's got to continue the struggle, but he's starting to come out.
I liked seeing Jake and Blackfire together, the intelligent dialogue between the two, where they're analyzing who is our bigger problem right now. Batman, who's nice and docile, even though he's due for an injection, or Ratface. And Ratface knowing what he knows is the bigger problem. I loved that. I thought it was a very necessary page, again, to build. It's one of the reasons why I found Blackfire so impressive, I think. When you're used to the Batman Rogue Gallery being characters like the Joker. And in 88, when you're looking at the Joker, you're seeing stories like Killing Joke and stuff like that are clearly portraying this man as a lunatic. There's moments in there where he has those one-on-ones with Batman where you see a little bit more from the Joker, but he's still the Joker, and you know that what you see in one comic with the Joker is going to be completely different in the next because of just how chaotic the guy is. To see a Batman villain who is so together and has put himself in such a powerful position, and then to see him so lucid and intelligent and cunning with his sidekick, so to speak, or his second in command, and to see both of them in that state, it added a sense of power to them. That was something you don't always see from Batman villains. I love Batman's Rogue Gallery, don't get me wrong, so I'm not knocking them at all. It's just interesting when you see something a little different thrown at you. And this was, in 88, this was very different, to see this type of character thrown at you. And it was like, wow, very powerful.
Oh, yeah. And I tell you, I like what you said with their concern for Ratface. But it's also not only because he knew a lot, but he was a willing conversion. They didn't have to break him. He wasn't brainwashed. He came willingly saying, hey, I'm in, guys. So when you have that willing conversion, there's not that spiritual connection. There's not that I will not betray my deacon. This is a regular thug, who could very easily break under questioning. This is somebody that they don't have any type of control over or any type of will, manipulation or anything like that. So that makes him dangerous in that way. And I thought that point was also really a cool factor.
When Batman's going for the food, I love the regression to like a primal phase. Mm-hmm. You're showing that these are primal needs, and your body is responding to them, and I'm responding to them. I need this food. It's something that I need to get by. I'm satisfied now because I've done this. And then he needs the next thing now. Okay, it's funny how he's going through. It reminds me of the Incredible Hulk. So this old Bill Bixby shows where the Hulk would do something that he desperately needs, and then I've taken care or saved the people or whatever. I got my revenge. Now I need peace and quiet, and I'll change back to Banner. Mm-hmm. It has this moment, and Bruce really is in that beastly like state where he now is looking for the peace and quiet, and we get to see Ratface ultimately questioned, and just as Deacon Blackfire and Jake were worried about, he's spilling his guts because he's trying to make a deal, and hopefully save his own behind, which is ultimately, he's an opportunist.
Oh, yeah.
He's a
rat face. He's a rat.
Absolutely. He's a rat-faced rat. And that's one of the great things about him is there was nothing out of character about any of this. I'm like, oh, yes, he's the perfect guy to be picked off. He would turn on you. The opportunity was there with Blackfire, where he saw an opportunity to hopefully be somebody powerful enough in the organization that when Blackfire ultimately pays off, he's going to do quite well being one of the command structure. Mm-hmm. But again, in this particular case, well, all right, that's not working out for me, so how can I make this work?
Well, here's another way that you could see it, mm-hmm. and part of me, I've seen this both ways.
Okay.
Could it be that just Ratface is an idiot, and he's boasting about the Deacon's strength and saying, ha-ha, you can't stop him, he's all-powerful kind of deal, and he's just an idiot?
Except, listen to the way he's talking about this. The Deacon's gathered all the homeless people in Gotham, convinced them he's some kind of messiah. He's got them running around town, killing crooks and lowlifes, making the city safe for normal folks. Blackfire claims God has ordered, and these are things that he carry on this holy crusade. This calling, of course, that's all bullshit. He's not really boasting. At this point, he's downplaying it like it's all bunk. Like he's above it all, in the sense that I wasn't pulled into any of this. This is what's really going on. I agree with you that he's boasting, but it seems to me more like instead of he's boasting in the favor of Blackfire, he's boasting about himself, how I wasn't pulled into all this. I'm above all that. This is what's really going on, and you people don't even realize it. Mm-hmm. So it seems like he's more boasting in his own favor. At least, I don't know, and maybe you disagree with me.
Well, I did agree. I do think that he was just being a rat. And just trying to, it's one of the biggest games that you always play, when you arrest a guy is let's make a deal. When you got two possible suspects, the first one to rat out gets the best deal. So this definitely is him just, throwing everything he knows on the table, seeing what kind of thing he can get. But as I was reading it, there was that, or is it just, one of those things where, because there are people who are so, dumb that they would throw that out there. But with I'm agreeing with you is what I'm saying. I'm saying there was something else it could have been, possible, but I don't think that was the case.
See, in my opinion, if he was boasting about Blackfire, if he really felt that strongly about Blackfire that he was throwing it out that way, he wouldn't have done what he did with Batman and gone after his own personal revenge. Right. If he really felt that strongly that he would throw in that boast about Blackfire, this really, again, is about him and what he wants. And he's clearly shown in his behavior that this is all about what he wants. With his intimidation of Batman, it was about making him... He was the one, out of all the people that were part of the whole brainwashing, he was clearly doing it to make himself feel bigger than he actually is.
Yeah.
His revenge was all about making himself feel bigger than he actually is. His boasting here is, again, about making himself look even more useful than he actually is. Because, a lot of this stuff Gordon and his crew could have figured out themselves. He does fill in some of the puzzle pieces, so he's useful. And you're right, as the first squealer, he's going to get some points for that. But a lot of this stuff we know from previous discussions in the previous issue, Gordon and his crew know a lot of this already.
Yeah.
So
they're already getting into the mine. So it's one of those deals where, I did like seeing this just because of, one of the things I like about cop stories and stuff like that is when you see the interrogation and you just see the guy break down and you're like, all right, that's, they're part of any cop story. And I like the fact that the cult, we are getting this strong police presence in this. It's not just about Batman dealing with it. It's about Gordon. It's about his cops. It's about Batman, Robin. It's about the full deal coming together to deal with this massive problem.
Now we go back to Bruce, which I was chomping at the bit for Bruce moments at this point. Seeing him in the city park, really kind of at this point, seeing him, he's like falling apart, I'm losing it. Seeing that this man is still, is that his blood on his hands from his wound? Is it something else? From the violence that he's seen around him? I don't know. The man is clearly still... it's not just the drugs that are working on this guy. It's just intense fatigue, as well as the fact that he took a bullet.
Yeah.
None of that's been I never saw a sequence where I felt like Blackfire and them did anything other than wrap up the wound. I don't think that he was. It doesn't even look like he was really cleaned up very well from that violence.
Yeah, they really didn't do too much for him. They've kept him alive and they've kept him up on his feet, but there was no transfusions, and anytime he did anything physical, he probably re-broke open. If they did do stitching on the bullet wound, they probably re-broke it open with everything he did with smashing out the window, and grabbing the food and just this walking. I thought that was just a cool, just seeing his body disintegrate, kind of like his mind was. It needs to reboot. It needs to just work the rest of the drugs out of his system. He needs just some downtime, and I thought that was a great way of showing it as he looks at the blood, and who knows, even if there's blood on his hands, that all could be imagination as well. You never know what's real with this, and I thought that was a cool factor behind this.
Again, the media sequences were something for me that I really, really enjoyed, because we got to see the public reaction to what's going on, and then once they found out that it was really Blackfire, a lot of the public's like, wait a minute, he's only really hurting criminals. Which was Blackfire's M.O. from the beginning. I don't think he was ever really cared about cleaning up Gotham as far as painting for himself a picture of, hey, I'm your hero of the city. Look what I've done for you. Look how the landscape has all changed. And once he gets that power deeply entrenched in, I think everybody's expendable. I don't think he cares about anybody but himself. He's really the ultimate dictator. The ultimate leader that, he's, like a king. And a king who doesn't care at all about his subjects. There's none of them. And I don't know if you see him differently than I do. I don't think anybody matters to him but him and his goal of ruling Gotham.
I don't know. He is kind of a kinder, gentler kind of guy. I could see him, just, taking care of, hugging puppies and, just being there for the children and just, that...
Do you think? No, I guess what I'm asking is.
I 100% agree with what you're saying. This is all about him,
right?
This is a megalomaniac. This is a pharaoh kind of deal, a god wannabe kind of guy. So there's so much going on in him that he doesn't care about anything other than himself and his plans. And in the end, that's what's going to bring him down, and that's what's going to make things, go against him. Right now, he's got the public on his side.
Right.
If he were to keep with this mindset where just take out the bad guys, just take out the drug dealers, he probably would be okay, and he could actually, run Gotham. He could be this underworld kind of underdweller king and god, and just everybody would be okay with him, and he could get away with a lot of stuff. But, once again, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And it was just a great to see, again, still the public's again, with him. That slimy, councilman is again trying to take full advantage of the situation, even suggesting that maybe a formal investigation in Gordon's office for corruption is required, because hey, Gordon's issued an arrest warrant for this guy. Gordon's got to be the bad guy because we know Blackfire's a good guy, kind of deal. I thought that again was just very great for this slime ball, and especially kind of like the poetic justice that he gets in the end.
Well, the thing that I'm looking for with Blackfire there, I started thinking to myself, what would have happened if Blackfire won? What if he actually succeeded? He does temporarily, but it never goes totally to the point where we get to see what, like 5 years down the road, this place would be like if Blackfire ran it, if that makes any sense. Eventually, because of the fact of the way he needs to sustain himself, nobody in the population would have been safe, right? I mean, he would eventually had to start picking from the quote-unquote good people, the non-criminals, and started using them. There would have been disappearances that either people couldn't explain, or maybe the explanation would have been, hey, you're my subjects,
Yeah.
I really see him being cold and callous and calculating about that.
And it's time for the servant. You are to serve Deacon Blackfire. You have no choice. It's for the good of us all that you sacrifice yourself, kind of deal. That's where it would have had to have gone eventually.
Talk about rat face number 2 is City Councilman Holmes. Just really jumping completely on the Blackfire, not endorsing Blackfire, but taking the opportunity to put himself in a position where he could say, I was for Blackfire or I'm not for Blackfire, based on how this lands. He's putting himself in because really this whole investigation of Gordon's administration, let's look at that one. He could say, I was investigating it based on the rumors that I heard, and I found that everything was clean and clear. I was doing my job, looking out for the people, because these are the questions that were being asked of me. But hey, look what I found, and I totally agree with Gordon and his crew. We should take down this Blackfire, if Gordon wins. Right. On the flip side, by doing this now, if Blackfire wins, he's put himself in a political structure where he can say, hey, look, Deacon Blackfire, you were saying this and this is what's up here. Look what I've done. And he's really taking a look at where's the political climate going and where can I make the best political move. What a rat.
Oh, yeah. Oh, big time. And it just, I love seeing that. This was a great, again, the guy's scum, but he's an awesome character. I enjoyed seeing this guy around.
And very consistently written.
Yeah.
And it is one of those people, I love the layers of this that you get to see these small moments of what city life is like in Gotham and how people would respond to this event going on. That added much more to the story to me than if we just remained our focus on Batman, Robin, and Gordon, if that makes sense. And the kind of the crew that we're familiar with. These news channel bits were essential to me to add another sense of environment and larger landscape to this than just a small compressed sequence. And it really was something that was important to me. Again, we flip to Gordon and Robin and the detective. Again, looking at this situation and getting infuriated with what the councilman's doing because he's shooting them in the foot. And these are your good people, and it shows just how few of them are in Gotham who really see situations for what they are. They're genuinely out for the good of the people. They're trying to make this work. This is the Gordon who in Killing Joke, with everything he went through with his daughter, was telling Bruce, we've got to show him our way works. You've got to bring him in. This is the same guy in the cult that we're seeing right now saying, oh, in spite of all this, I've got to, as commissioner, I'm going by the book. How dare this guy investigate me for, my office for corruption? This is what we're all about. This is who we are. This is what we do. And I love that moment and the passion in it because it felt so real to who Gordon was. This was a great time to be reading Batman comics. And talk about continuity or not. Like the Cult and Killing Joke stories like that I'm mentioning. Yes, Killing Joke played in the continuity as far as with what it did deeply with Barbara Gordon, and that we're still reading that today. But these were both stories, like, at the time, did these fit into the monthly Batman books? No. They're just really good Batman stories. You know what I mean? And it really doesn't, and that's why I always caution people when it comes to continuity. I love continuity, and these do, to me, fit into continuity, but I plug them in. Like, the Cult fits in. When did it happen? Sometime before Death in the Family, because Jason's still with us. Yeah. But as far as what issues does it fit in between, I have no clue. And it doesn't really matter to me, other than it's a good Batman story. So I love continuity in the sense that I can plug this in, and I do feel this is an event that happened in DC history. And I was glad to see Deacon Blackfire show up as one of the people coming back because that just added that sense to me that this story is in canon. But I don't really care about specifics. I don't need to plug it in between a couple of Batman issues. It just doesn't, or Detective Comics. It doesn't matter to me from that sense, other than that I know that this was an event that happened in Batman's life. And that's where my sense of continuity, I think, has always been... I want to know these stories happen. I want to know these stories matter, but it doesn't always have to plug in neatly. I can do that myself and just be satisfied with a really good tale. And this is a really good tale.
Oh, yeah. And I like seeing Gordon and Jason interacting.
Yeah.
Especially, Jason's, sharing with him his plans to infiltrate the organization. And Gordon's like, hey, I don't know. I don't agree with you. But Jason's like, hey, got to do what we got to do kind of deal. I thought that was just a cool moment between the two of them.
Still going through with that crazy scheme. I mean, that's commentary. Now, Batman at this point, again, showing that we're still in that primal state, where he sees the people there and their picnic basket and realizes, okay, these are things. He's becoming more lucid, but yet he didn't want to hurt the people, scares them away. Using actually going to his roots of why do I wear this costume? To be scary and intimidating. and using that to his advantage right now to get the eggs. But I loved him looking at the eggs. It wasn't just eating them. Eggs. I should be able to hold them down. Get the system right, get my head together, then think things out. It's this primal need of Batman, his head not being together, at his core has to be something. What is bothering him so much? This is one of the core things when he was sitting on the edge of that. He probably couldn't put his finger on it. That would bother a man that devoted his life to honing himself, that his mental faculties right now are wonky.
Oh, yeah, and I love this sequence. And it's funny, as I'm reading it, the first thought that did pop into my head was, hey, boo-boo, gonna steal the picnic basket.
I love that we've turned him into an ornery Yogi Bear. I'm smarter than the average bat.
Couldn't help myself. It just popped in there. But as you're talking, though, it is true. You do see some of Bruce there. You do see the analytical kind of mind as he's starting to work through and tries to clear out his head. That was, something I kind of dig seeing. And as the sequencing plays out, as he's starting to work through and he's starting to process this, I like that realization he kind of had. That Blackfire did break him. And I thought that was a cool moment.
I love that Boo Boo's in the sewer in a trench coat. Hey, Boo Boo! Wow, you took this to a place I didn't expect. I like it. It actually fits for me. I'm looking at this story totally different. It's a lot more family-friendly now when you put it that way.
Yeah.
It's all secret plot by Snagglepuss.
So is Gordon like Ranger Rick?
I don't know. Yeah, that's a good point. Although didn't Ranger Rick and Yogi had kind of an They could be friendly, but they had kind of an adversarial relationship. So I don't know. That's I don't know. We'll have to figure out who would Ranger Rick be. 'Cause it's certainly not Deacon Blackfire.
No.
Or maybe it is Ranger Rick finally getting a one up on Yogi. I'm going to get him for these picnic baskets. I don't know.
That's a pretty sadistic Ranger there. Yeah. Hey, talk about punishment fitting the crime there, buddy.
Yeah. That makes Ratface. Who's Ratface? Huckleberry Hound. I always felt Huckleberry Hound had a dark side. Jake is definitely Snagglepuss.
Oh, yeah.
Because Snagglepuss was a smart and crafty one, but he had a little bit of a wicked side to him, too. I didn't see him being a leader, but I definitely saw him, if Ranger Rick turned his back, Snagglepuss would definitely be the one to shove the knife in and, take over.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You know?
You know what?
Exit stage left, indeed, Yeah.
Heaven's the Murgatory.
Yeah, I don't know. Ratface, I don't know if I'm sold on him being Huckleberry Hound. I'm trying to think of who else Hanna-Barbera-wise would fit for him. Mm. Oh, who was the one? Who's the one with the wacky races? The one.
Snidely Whiplash and Muttley.
Yes.
There we go.
That's Ratface. Snidely Whiplash. Not quite Muttley, because there was something endearing about Muttley. Do you get an endearing vibe from Ratface?
Oh God, no. No, there's nothing endearing. There's nothing nice, and
Pirate Guy. Pirate Guy is Muttley.
There we go.
Because Pirate Guy clearly was a part of all this. He was trying to manipulate Batman. But yet, I definitely felt like when he had that patch on, he was telling that whole story, I would sit down and listen to that guy. And Muttley, he's not as crazy as Muttley, but even though Muttley was the one with Snidely Whiplash, and he was definitely part of the bad guy crew, I always liked Muttley. And I really probably shouldn't, but I do. So, yeah, that's... so Pirate Guy is Muttley.
Yeah, how wonderful it is. The fact that we had the Secret Six, the Muppet Secret Six. Yeah. We now have the Hanna-Barbera cult.
But we've kind of pitted them against each other. Yeah. We've kind of made it like a war of the Hanna-Barbera characters. That's not going to end well for Ranger Rick.
No. Now, we could actually... I don't know.
I do think he's Ranger Rick. Because really, you would think about it, who is Yogi Bear's real major adversary?
Yeah, it is Ranger Rick.
It is Ranger Rick.
And Gordon, actually, even though we're changing genders, could be that Cindy Bear that's friends with Yogi. Yeah, I know we're changing genders, but it's kind of that same type of, just that friendship and that camaraderie kind of deal. And Boo Boo and Cindy have a friendship, and it's all kind of that, it fits. They're all bears.
Wow. See, I kind of see Catwoman more as being a Cindy Bear, but for the purposes of this story, we almost got to put Gordon in that role.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, See, I'm talking only this story-wise. If we're going to go outside...
No, you know what? Realistically, going off of your love for Huckleberry Hound, though, I would have no problem with making Gordon the detective Huckleberry Hound.
You know what? Hey, why don't we go... Or
Quick Draw McGraw.
Booyah. Quick Draw McGraw is definitely Gordon.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so we got that. And then Huckleberry Hound, maybe the detective? Because he comes in, and I could see Huckleberry Hound having that conversation when he comes in talking about the things that they found. Yeah, that would be like an expository moment for, Huckleberry Hound where he's out there talking. A lot of exposition from him at that point. I don't know. I see that. I don't know. It's just me.
No, I'm liking your thought process on this. This is definitely kind of fitting in.
So we still need.
We're absolutely insane for even actively talking about this, and not only talking about it, we're rationalizing it, defending it.
Well, you know what I love about it too? We're talking about it like we planned to talk about it, and this really came off of one Yogi Bear comment that you made that really was not planned to go anywhere other than just like a quick little chuckle about a picnic basket. All right, let's keep going. So Yogi nights up. Yeah. And I love it, though, that it isn't him being all better.
Yes.
It is him saying, I've got to do this to get better. He isn't 100%, clearly not 100%. He knows he's not. He feels he needs to face his demons in order to survive them. And he's going up against a Ranger Rick who is thoroughly dangerous because Ranger Rick is 100%. He psychologically knows the state that Batman's in. He's going to play on that. And, Blackfire versus Batman at this point is Batman's still hallucinating. He's covering himself up in armor. He's building a wall around himself in hopes of defeating an enemy who, quite frankly, doesn't need to build a wall. Mm-hmm. He'll break it down.
Yeah, I love the fact that Bruce realized that he can't run and hide from this. He can't wait till he's better. He's got to confront him now. Blackfire has a piece of him. He's got to take that piece back. He's got to fight back, or if not, he will forever have that little bit of control of him. There will always be that defeat in him. And it's something you can't get around. Even once the drugs are out of his system, after once the medical and everything's patched up and he's healthy, got a full night's sleep, everything's rocking and rolling, there will still be that doubt. And that's why he had to go in right now. And I thought that was just a cool mindset, a cool usage of, again, the artwork as he nights up. I ate that last sequence up.
Blackfire's speech here, I just think, is one of the best moments in the series. Because at this point, we've established that he's got this cult that he's leading. We've established he's done this to Batman. Now we need to see why these people would follow him. Again, now we see the man that is, what does he believe? How is he playing off of them? We know that he's playing off the weakness of the homeless people. Playing off of, everybody has that sweet spot that you could dig at. And if you know where it's at, you can really pull at their heartstrings and then motivate them to your cause. He's doing that by digging for them, saying, hey, you're the people that are ignored, forgotten, the citizens of Gotham. While Gotham's out, its police force, its administration is out sitting there spending all of its time dealing with these criminals and protecting them. But instead of remedying the problem, they're ignoring its citizens and the needs of its citizens and leaving you to this point. Well, this injustice has gone on long enough. We are going to rise up because of the will of God and take control of this city. We are going to finally take back Gotham for us. And as the leader and as a motivator, whoa. At that moment, I'm like, dude has got an interesting way of selling something that it's hard to argue with. He's totally bonkers, but yet there's a certain amount of reality to what he's saying, and it's just enough that you sit there and go, oof, I would have a tough time getting up there and standing next to him and poking down his argument in as compelling a way. I completely disagree with him, and I firmly feel that, but to stand up there and argue with him in front of a group like that who is so passionately believing in him, how do you poke holes in that enough? Because they are disenfranchised. They have been ignored. And that's true. So how do you convince them but this guy's bonkers, you shouldn't follow him, and this isn't going to improve your lot in life. You guys are going to be, he's going to bathe in you in a few years. I don't know. They don't know that. So it's an interesting story in that we as readers get to see little tiny things about him that would convince us that you would never follow him in a million years. These people don't see that. They don't get to see those windows into it. It is the funny part about watching these stories from our perspective and being able to see the whole picture and knowing that these people aren't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tell you, I love when you have these really good madmen speeches. These purely psychotic people who just go and they just open up and they just get the crowd on their side. It's part of it. I think is there is got to be a little bit of madness in you that you don't hold back. You're not afraid to let the passion fire up. You're not afraid to I don't want to look like an idiot kind of deal because you don't care. It's that whole kind of just go. It's all for broke kind of mindset. And it. Blackfire, man, he's the evil version of Newt Rockney. He had the win one for the Gipper story, just the every possible sports metaphor you could think of, just all wrapped into this whole giant package of basically breaking it down to the one thing that the evildoers must be punished and destroyed. And it just like, hoorah, kind of like, you could feel the energy coming off the pages because, you know what? It's so easy to get caught up in that kind of stuff. That's the one thing about him. Yeah, he's psychotic. Yeah, he's evil, but you understand him. I completely can see how people would side with him, whether they've been brainwashed or whether they've just been so downtrodden that, hey, this guy's giving me something. He's giving me something, not only, a possible step in life, but kind of some food, some shelter, something, to feel good about myself. I'm no longer the bum that people spit on. I'm a member of this, organization. We're cleaning up Gotham. We are taking down Gotham. We are its saviors. We are anointed by God. We have all these wonderful things that are just going to strengthen us and rally us, and we are going to do such good things here. And I ate this completely up. I love this.
For years, the government has ignored the campers of Jellystone Park. The bears have been taking your lunches, ruining your campsites. For years, you've been paying your fee to stay here, camp here with your family and stuff like that, and it's just been ignored. Well, it's time we take the park back from the bears. It's time that we show them that we matter. I'm so totally reading this in a different way. Like this could be a Johnny DC title.
I honestly had no idea this would go that way. I figured this would be a one-shot, just a quick little chunk.
Yes.
Oh, no, this has got staying power.
And Bruce finally gets to the ranger station and finds it to be decadent. I mean, it's just great.
Now, one thing I did like, I liked it when Bruce was, coming back in, and he was you see him just slip through the crowd. They're so excited, they're so energized, and they're so passionate that he is able just to move through and go into Blackfire's inner sanction. I thought that was a kind of a cool segment going through.
Especially because he's one of them. They're aware of that. The inner council that's going on between Blackfire and Jake is not something they made all of the homeless aware of. They didn't tell them to look out for Batman or that he's left them. They've seen him amongst them. So at this point, why would they think anything was wrong with what he was doing?
Now, the other thing I liked seeing, though, even though Bruce went into there and he went into the inner sanction, he was thinking about bringing Gordon back in there. He was going to, he knew that he would need Gordon there. He confronted Blackfire. He's confronting Blackfire by being, going into the inner sanctuary, looking in, seeing this is just a man. He doesn't have these mystic powers. He's just another common thug that he can take down. I thought that was when he starts seeing him differently, when he starts, having that confirmation in his mind, he's now going back to the main plan. It's not just about him. It's about bringing Gordon, bringing the troops back down there to take down this army. I thought those were some cool realizations on Bruce's part.
I also read that differently in the sense, though, it shows that Bruce is not confident that he can defeat him. Because he's sitting there, this is a line, I want to see the expression on Blackfire's face when they slap the cuffs on him. Not I slap the cuffs on him. When they slap the cuffs on him. He wants to bring Gordon and the SWAT crew down here so they take down Blackfire. Not so he takes down Blackfire. There's a huge distinction there that is very un-Batman-like.
See, I didn't see that, but as you're talking about it, I'm in agreement with you because it's the whole. I look at it as a team concept, but yeah, Bruce would want to be the one to take down Blackfire, so there may be still some kind of weakness.
He's not. It's not. I agree with you on a team aspect normally, but take a look at this. Gordon will come down and clean out these sewers with a squad of SWAT officers. Not we will. Gordon will. Mm-hmm. He's taking himself out of the equation, other in the sense to be an observer in the background. Nowhere in here is he talking about what he's going to do. He's talking about how Blackfire needs to be stopped and all that. He'll pay for all this stuff, but Bruce isn't going to be the one to do it. Gordon will. Mm-hmm. Gordon and the SWAT team, which isn't Batman-like at all. It's different than calling for backup or calling in a crew to come down with you because of overwhelming numbers and things like that. I definitely feel that Bruce at this point sees the need to have a whole SWAT team down there, but he doesn't feel at this point that he doesn't see himself as being a part of that, which I thought was an interesting distinction. Shows that psychologically, that guy that built the armor around himself,
it's starting to chip away.
Yeah, and also that armor is exactly what we saw it as. That's a hallucination. He's putting that on as a hallucination. It's not. If it actually was there, we wouldn't see it. We wouldn't need to. His demeanor would show it automatically. It's not there.
Yeah. Now, I kind of one of the things that I also digged about this scene was as he's sitting there planning this, as he's thinking this, again, he's in a weakened state. He's not as quick, and he does make a mistake again, and they thump him from behind. They catch him, kind of even mid-comment, mid-thought balloon. I thought that was kind of a neat, just kind of moment where, again, interrupting what he was doing. This isn't our normal Batman. The regular Batman wouldn't have gotten caught like that, wouldn't have gotten surprised and snuck up on. And again, we're seeing the weaker Batman. We're seeing what Blackfire did to him and how messed up he is.
Pirate Dude has no patch. That's him again. There's no way that's not that same guy. Was the patch a put on?
Could be.
To set a mood and a tone. It's interesting that it's gone. Interesting art choice. Because it was only on when he was telling the stories to Batman about the history of the Dutch coming over on the boats and stuff like that. So, was that an art mistake? I don't know that I see it that way. Because we do see that guy, I'm just flipping through to look at the later issues. We see him pop up again, and we never see him with the patch on again.
Well, you know how some people have reading glasses? Maybe he's got an eye patch for storytelling.
That's a good point. It actually did add, in fairness to him, it did add to the story for me. Who did we say he was? Oh, he's Muttley. And Muttley is known to accessorize.
Yeah.
So actually that does fit, okay. And again, even though he's chaining up Batman here, there is something about him I still find endearing.
You can kind of almost hear him go,
Yes, I'm with you. He doesn't lose anything for me. Whereas Ranger Rick back there, I totally want to see him get his butt kicked.
Yeah.
But I never feel that way about Muttley. Snagglepuss I want to see get beat up too.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Now, this whole sequence after that with Robin, I like that Robin was looking on to this whole thing, but this whole sequence with Gordon and the mayor and how this all played out, I love that this story, we're 2 issues in and we're still seeing this. Blackfire has a very intelligent attack. It is what I liked about Bane. The Bane comparison isn't used lightly here. It's what I liked about Bane is there was a plan. Blackfire has a deep plan. It really isn't just about controlling the homeless and setting up a name for himself. He is taking down any possible obstruction to taking over Gotham. He's putting people in a position where they're looking to a leader. He's taken away confidence from the police force. He's taken down the mayor. Now he's going to take down not just the mayor, but everybody who could possibly take over that position, and offering now his assistance to handle all this. I love the way this all gradually played out. It was something where it was a very brilliant build. It was a cunning plan, and it added something to me where it was like, woof. Every time I say cunning plan, I start thinking Monty Python now. But it was something where the layout of all this was absolutely fantastic, because the mayor, again, is somebody you want to see blow up. I love that nobody's clean in Gotham, except for our police officers. The political structure's not. The mayor, the city councilman, they're all kind of like out for what is my political gain here. They don't really care for the people because they're in a city where it's probably very hard to, and it's very hard to like them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I dig some of the art sequencing when we see them rigging up the liminal blow up from underneath in that manhole cover. You can kind of just see that popping up and just, you know what's about to happen. And I thought that was just, again, a really cool play out of, the story. And as I said, it was another cool art moment that, I enjoyed seeing. And I love the fact that the slimy garbage, Holmes gets taken out by a garbage truck. It's very poetic justice right there. It's a suicide garbage truck just plowing right into him. And the look on his aide as it's coming, like, as he's jumping out of the way, not moving Holmes at all. He's saving himself. So, again, great usage, great, kind of dealings. Because that slime, as soon as he heard the mayor dead, he starts thinking this is his political stepping stone. Hey, they're going to need to appoint a temporary one. We know who that's going to be. I can do so much good for this city. Yeah. What's that? Boom.
I did like then, again, going to the Eye on Gotham. Mm-hmm. Again, that sequence where it showed that Blackfire is now making political statements. He's now getting a hold of the press and releasing information. However that's happening. Because we never get a clear idea of how he's getting this information out there, but they would be interested on any news from Blackfire as far as what is his statement on this. Mm-hmm. What is his take? And right now, the media doesn't. He's a compelling story. The media has no reason to believe that he's evil. because Gotham is full of corruption. So maybe he's right. Maybe the police is bad. Maybe we should be listening to this guy. He's the only one that seems to be talking about anything positive for protecting us. What's he got to say? Let's get the word out there and, kind of see what happens. That would be newsworthy.
And Gordon's still saying it's Blackfire, but when confronted, he really doesn't have any hard evidence to say that it's Blackfire. All he really has is the rat's comments. And you know what? Can you really base a full everything on the fact of this guy who not only hacked up some dude, but then attacked a police officer? Yeah, he's a reliable source. He's trusted. It's, again, I did like seeing that because, Gordon, they have some trust for Gordon, but you know what? There is no hard evidence for him. So let's report all of this. Let's see what happens.
Batman being led down the sewer was, to me, another great, fantastic art moment. Because at this point, we've got a Batman who's more lucid. His mind is back sort of in the game, but he's still got those terrors. He's been broken. And that's just it. It's, yes, Batman's back as far as in the sense that he's got his wits about him, but he's also been broken, and there's scars there, deep-rooted scars that he's going to have to get past somehow. And he was right on the sense with the confrontation, but it's also, he isn't done healing yet, mentally. How do you get yourself back to where you need to be mentally after all you've been through? But I loved him being captured again because this added more of a sense of, it's often hard with your top-tier superheroes to get a real sense that they're in genuine danger. And this story, even though I knew reading the 4-issue series every month that Batman would win somehow at the end, there was a really deep sense of Batman's in big trouble here. How is he going to beat this? Is Jason going to be able to pull him back? Is it Jason that's going to pull him back, or is he going to do it himself? Or what is it going to, we haven't seen Alfred at this point. It's a story where there's a lot of question marks as far as how Batman's going to get past. But I love seeing him combat. His arms are chained behind his back, and he is fighting using his skills here of, using his feet, using, body momentum, using all these things to fight an overwhelming number. And Jake to me right now is pretty formidable. Not as a combatant, but as a thug, and as a thug who's survived probably because he doesn't hesitate to kill people. So that whole sequence. Now, the blood that, when we see Batman eventually go into the water and the guns are firing, was that blood from his original wound? Because it doesn't look like he's hit at all, right?
Yeah, that was the original wounds kind of reopening and just a lot of nasty stuff that has happened to him coming out. I don't see him getting hit by any machine gun sequence. And this was, again, another wonderful visual, treat that, seeing him sit there say, I need more time to form a plan. This is good that we're walking as he's trying to formulate, and he knows he's got to strike. They're going to kill me. I need to act kind of deal. And that was, again, just a cool moment. And I did chuckle a little bit when the villains see the blood and they assume he's dead, because you know what happens when you assume. It's, guess what, buddy? And, your nightmares are going to come back to you. And I thought that was just a really, nice, segment. And it was interesting for me to see that Jake is not as loyal as you might think, because he does call Blackfire crazy. And he knew that Batman would be trouble, and it's this kind of his way of saying, see, I knew he'd be trouble, I'll deal with that crazy idiot.
And see, in all honesty, if you saw Snagglepuss with the Ranger, would you honestly think the Ranger could fully trust Snagglepuss? I'm being totally serious here, and you're laughing.
Oh, yeah.
It's really one of those things where I would see him turning on him in an instant. He Snagglepuss comes across as all prim and proper. But he would certainly, and he's got that collar on, but, that to me is, if you're pink and wearing a collar like that, I don't know that I can trust you. So it's just, he always looks shifty and suspicious to me. So I don't know. That's kind of my take on the whole thing. But it was the whole line here. He's going to be mad when he finds out what happened. Big deal. To hell with that crazy bastard. I'll handle it. So he feels he's got his own manipulation game going on here with Blackfire, which shows the confidence level Jake has at this moment. Also his lack of respect, because now, talk about in a situation where you really need, you have a very tentative relationship with everybody there. It's clear that Jake and these thugs don't necessarily, these thugs are willing to listen to Jake. You tell me they wouldn't turn on him they know, they're lucid enough to know that Jake is a bigwig, and maybe they should listen to him. So I thought it was interesting that they didn't turn him into Blackfire.
Well, one of the things I was kind of thinking, because I started thinking just beyond the pages, this may be Jake's inner council. This may be the guys that he knows he can trust. When he goes on a mission, these are the guys he takes with him. These are the guys that he knows have a loyalty to him, not just Blackfire. These are his guys, and it's very, possibility. And you see that a lot inside any type of, organization, where you have the recognized chain of command, but you have your own little units, and your little units will go to their immediate supervisor over the bigwig, over the upper echelon kind of guys. So I kind of saw as a possibility that this team was Jake's hit squad, not exactly completely Blackfire's hit squad.
And I do see Muttley being more loyal to Snagglepuss than Ranger Rick.
Yeah.
Which is what we see in that sequence, and I do buy into that. But
you know
you're
what?
right,
Here's
though.
the thing. Jake could actually be, Snidely Whiplash.
No, but we know
And
that's
not
Ratface. Oh, that's Ratface. Come on.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Maybe Ratface could be, Snagglepuss.
I just don't see that.
I
don't see that. Because, really, Ratface is really total slime. And it's like, do you actually feel like Snidely Whiplash? You ever look at him and go, wow, he's smart enough to pull one over on his boss? You don't. Everything goes wrong for Snidely Whiplash, which is what happened to Ratface. It's like Snagglepuss wins out in the end.
Okay.
He's a little more crafty than Snidely Whiplash.
I'll give you that one. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not totally sold on Jake being Snagglepuss. I'm with you on that.
See, the thing that leads me to Jake being Snidely Whiplash is that Snidely was kind of a bit of a leader, and we do see leadership functionalities in Jake.
You see that with Ratface too. It's just the difference with to me with Snidely Whiplash, things always went horribly wrong with him, which is why Muttley laughed at him.
Yeah,
and Ratface really, with the way his events turn out, that really is a lot more in tune with Snidely Whiplash.
Okay.
I would definitely put a question mark on 100% on Jake being Snagglepuss. I agree with you on that. It's something really when we do casting, we'd have to have the whole Hanna-Barbera gang come in and really kind of, have them all play the role to see who would really be the best Jake. But I really, for me, I'm honestly, if I'm producing this at any level or directing it, my Ratface is so Snidely Whiplash. Or I'm out of the project. That's a selling point for me. That's a deal breaker.
Okay. That's a deal breaker. Okay.
Can we get Hong Kong Phooey in this somehow? I don't know who he'd be. Because Robin's already boo-boo.
Yeah, Robin's definitely boo-boo.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I don't think there's an opportunity in this one. Maybe if there's a sequel. There's a reason you were talking about, should we do a cult number 2?
Yeah.
We need a cult number 2 so there'd be an appropriate character to be Hong Kong Phooey.
Oh, I guarantee I know who that character would be.
Who?
Nightwing.
Oh, there we go. Okay, I'm with you on that one. Okay. Wow. Maybe we should do a cult 2. We should do a cult too. Like we did the first one. I like this bit. Let's get back to the book. I like this bit with Robin diving into the river looking for Batman. I like that he was smart enough. See, this is why do I like Jason Todd from this so much? And I really haven't talked a whole lot about this other than the Gordon sequences. These bits in the sewer with his stealth moments where he was recognizing his limitations. He's obviously the most lucid person in the sewer right now. As far as he really is acting the way Batman should in the sewer. And he sticks to the shadows, sticks to his disguise where necessary. When there's an opportunity, now I've got where Batman is. Batman's isolated. He's away from them. I don't have to worry about overwhelming numbers. This is a moment where I can get with him. We can regroup together, come up with a plan. His operating there, and all these things are unsaid. We see them visually acted out. It's a great example of where scripting, artwork, storytelling, all blends together to make an interesting story for a character that we see with very little dialogue. Robin was brilliant in these moments. I loved so much that we were just following him in the background, his little appearances there. Right down to that moment with the rats where they're all kind of swarming all over him. It was just such a cool moment with him. I really loved that we never lost the fact that he isn't quite Batman, but yet he's very well trained and is using those skills to the best of his ability. Jason Todd in this was a home run.
Oh, yeah, very mature Robin in this. He played it out smart. He did how he needed to handle it. If he had been, if he flew off the handle, if he had reacted, he would have reacted when Bruce was doing that initial fight, which would have made things even worse. Probably could have gotten him killed, could have gotten Bruce killed. He needed that separation. I really dig that. And there's something that just creeps me out when you get those swarms of rats.
Yeah.
Anytime it's in a movie, I do freak out a little bit, even on the comic book page, because I can still hear in my head the chirping, squeaking, whatever the sound noise that those rats make, and just that whole just kind of like gets you going. And I like seeing him. Initially, he had that cool, calm, collected. When he starts getting in some of these sequences, it's the fight or flight mentality kicks in, and he's got to do this. But throughout the whole time, it's about finding Bruce. It's about saving Bruce. It's about being there for him and getting him out of this situation.
And that was something that I really just ate up.
Yeah.
That particular moment. Just seeing him in that sequence. I take it, continuity-wise, talking about that again, where did I place this in my mind? To me, if it's not the story that immediately is before Death in the Family, it's pretty darn close to that. Because the maturity you mentioned before was, for me, this was the story where I could see why Bruce wouldn't let him wouldn't want to let him blow up.
Yeah.
Whereas before, I don't know, maybe Bruce would go a little slower to get over there. Bruce's motives are a little suspect. Yeah. But I did, this story, I could see why. Okay, after Batman had this adventure with this guy, I need to vote to save this Robin because, he really, took a couple for the team here with the rat attack and stuff like that. We mentioned this briefly earlier, so we'll just go over real quick. The Deacon looks to be in his mid-40s, no older, but yet these files go back to the turn of the century. It really had me this sense of, is this guy legit? And I really, the more clues that were released in this whole thing, and then we learn later and we'll talk more about it when we get into issue 3 and 4 in our next episode talking about this. There's some reveals that really just make it compelling that this is legit with Blackfire. Mm-hmm. He really, really is what he says he is. And he's just a lunatic. And he does fit more like the Ra's al Ghul vein of things. This ending sequence just begs to be talked about. Especially, I loved the decision to go completely black with it all, where we can't see anything. And I love the way it was done on this one page where we see Jason quickly in the dark, and then we're seeing things through his eyes. Batman, can you hear me? Are you there? Yes. Where are we? What is this place? Hell. You see, I've been bad. This is my punishment. But why are you being punished, Batman? Because I didn't keep the faith. I doubted. That was wrong. Now, what did he doubt? Does he mean that he doubted Blackfire? Or that he doubted his own course of action? I mean, I take it to this point that I don't know that Batman could answer that if you asked him at that moment.
Batman still, once again, there's a lot of confusion going on there. There's a lot of, blood loss, the fatigue, famine, still some drugs in the system. There's a lot of stuff messing with Bruce's mind still. And it's all kind of catching up to him. It's right now, Bruce is punch drunk. He really... He's not, thinking clearly. So if you were to ask him, he may not even remember this. He may not recall this or even know what he was talking about. It's good. This is a really just cool moment seeing that, yes, there was some confidence. Yes, there was some of Bruce coming back as he was trying to step up, as he was trying to lash out against Blackfire, but he's still not 100%. He's still not there. And this even plays more into some of the comments you made about how he was talking about bringing Gordon down there to take care of the problem. How Gordon and his men would arrest him. This again is playing into the lack of confidence, the chinks in the armor that is Batman kind of deal.
That sequence, talk about one of the more horrifying panels. It's a very small, tiny one in that bottom right-hand corner where he first says, "Welcome to hell." That look on Batman's face, probably one of the creepiest moments I've ever remember seeing him a part of in the entire time I've ever read Batman. I mean, he's nuts there. I mean, that look on his face, he's lost it. And there's something so frightening about, you're so used to seeing this guy so controlled. He spent his whole career focusing on getting himself so controlled. To see him so out of control like that was like, I remember the story Venom from Legends of the Dark Knight where he was jacked up on Venom. And this is even creepier than that to me. There's something about this that just, did you read that story, Venom?
Yeah, I did.
And I feel this is, personally for me, this is even creepier. But then we see that sequence, and we don't know yet what the bodies were for the first time through in the read-through. Later on, we find out definitely why Blackfire's using these bodies and what's the deal with them. But just Robin's look on his face in that double page is when the flashlight goes on and we finally get to see what Bruce is surrounded by. We saw tidbits of it in the previous panels, but it doesn't mean anything until you see them all together there and really see just the scope and scale of it and how long this has really been going on. The question is, how long has Blackfire been down here?
He's had a little bit of time down there. He's got a little bit of collection going on. And I loved just the lead up to that when Jason is first, he's stumbling over something. He's like, what's it? And then as he's stepping, he's starting to realize what he's stepping on. And he's like, it can't be. The smell. No. Kind of just that little bit of a natural knee-jerk reaction, that little bit of panic when you see mounds of dead bodies and realize you've been walking on top of these dead bodies. That, for me, was another cool moment leading up to that welcome to hell kind of deal that was going on. I was like, oh, this is nice. This is a way to end an issue.
I'm a fan of Hitchcock. I've mentioned Hitchcock movies on the show multiple times. And what I liked about his cinematography and how a lot of his sensibilities play into some of the ways that comic book writers and artists use the cinema aspect of comics. It's EC, the old EC comics, the horror, the Vault of Terror, the Tales from the Crypt, that Vault of Horror, and Tales from the Crypt, and those type of things, were books that when they did re-releases. It was Gladstone, I believe it was, that was doing those, or Gemstone. Might have been Gemstone that was doing re-releases of those horror books. I got a chance to read those, and those were some really gorgeous artwork, great stories. A lot of them were really scary. Took it's like Twilight Zone enhanced type of stories, and I do recommend people seeking those out if you like horror like this. This stuff that was done in this story, this Batman story, it's one of the creepiest Batman stories, if not the creepiest Batman story I ever read, in the way that it was handled, because I genuinely was scared for Batman. Not for people that were associated with him, not for his love interest, not for Alfred, or Gordon, or any of those other people, for Batman. And it's rare that you get genuinely, really scared for Batman. And I don't know that there's been a story since, even with what went on with R.I.P. and Final Crisis with him, I don't know that I was ever really this scared for Batman as I was in this story. There's something with the way it was delivered in the build, and that's not taken away from any of those stories that I mentioned, the modern ones. I'm not taking anything away from this, so please don't take me wrong. I love those stories, and I think that they're just as good as this and just as compelling. But as far as the actual sense of terror that was built, I don't remember a Batman story that built this kind of terror for me. Mm-hmm. And this really delivered that. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the dialogue, but also the art direction in this. This is really a well-crafted horror story.
Oh, this is definitely a well-crafted horror story. And this was just a great, wonderful just examination of how to break somebody, what you need to do. And that was the whole Bane story, and with R.I.P. and all these stories where Bruce was broken, where they broke him down and they took, it wasn't a simple attack. It wasn't just a direct assault. You got to hit him from multiple sides. You got to do stuff beyond what a normal person would even think you would have to do to take him down. And anytime you get a story like that, as I said, I eat up the story. I like seeing the psychological side of Batman. That beyond just the guy who's disciplined fighter and who kicks a lot of people's butt. No, there's the mental side that is Batman, and seeing a war against that mind is just a cool Batman story. This was just really enjoyable.
Hanna-Barbera, Johnny DC present Yogi's Last Picnic. All right, our next part of this, we'll definitely talk about issues 3 and 4. But great first half of the book.
Yeah.
Reaching melting point. Not sure we can make it.
Hey, Sean and Jim. This is Matthew K. On your forums, not that matters, I don't post all that often, but anyways, I thought I'd throw my name out this time. I was just listening to your Under the Red Hood episode because I finally saw the movie, and the question you asked is, how you would have voted for Jason. And I actually read the story in collected form after he had already been killed. But the overall effect of that story was that I really liked him, and I wanted him to live at the end, even though I knew he was dead. And that was like the foregone conclusion. So, I mean, at the time, if I had been reading that story, I definitely would have voted for him to live because it had made me like him. And I wasn't really a heavy Batman reader at the time, just very occasional, kid at the comic store buying whatever looked neat at the time. So, anyways, just thought I'd share that. Thanks. Great show as always, guys. Bye.
There's so many stories that I want to do on the show. It would be funny if we had unlimited time to record the podcast. It's just, unfortunately, we don't. I want to, at some point, hopefully actually do Death in the Family, do a cover-to-cover on that. Because it is one of those stories that I agree with you. And that's why The Cult, I'm so glad we're doing this now. Because I do feel The Cult is kind of a natural lead into the characterization of Jason Todd that we see in Death in the Family. And that's why, even though I mentioned in this episode, chronologically, in my head, I kind of put The Cult as taking place almost immediately before Death in the Family, because it's kind of an evolution of the character of growth, where people have a natural growth cycle, and events in their lives take them to that point. I feel the events of The Cult kind of led to the Jason Todd that we see in Death in the Family, where we see him take a very heroic stance in that story. And you're right, I would have voted, I did vote for him to live, but it is, a lot of that is based on his characterization in Death of the Family. He was a Robin who, I remember, there were stretches where I really did not care for him. But I never felt like I wanted to kill him off either. I think it was more of the comparison to Dick Grayson, which is hard for a character. Jim did mention on this episode, which I thought was something that was very interesting, that he saw qualities of Tim Drake in Jason Todd in The Cult. I don't know that I ever made that connection, but it was interesting that he did, because that's more of his Robin. So Jim's storytelling and reading Tim Drake more often, that tends to be his focus, whereas Dick Grayson was always mine. He was my starting Robin, so he tends to be the pinnacle. Here's the funny part, though. I don't find myself comparing Tim Drake to Dick Grayson that often, because I do feel that the whole, and I think it is heavily due to the origin story of Tim Drake, and how different that was, and how he discovered who Batman and Robin were, and he came at it from and was really trying to bring Dick Grayson and Bruce Wayne back together in his role. So he always had kind of his own identity. I never found myself comparing him. But that also, again, may be due to Jason Todd. I'd already experienced a Robin change. And for me, I was very comfortable with that, whereas Jim had never read Jason prior to Tim Drake. So, at least from my understanding on when he read The Cult, well, I don't know. That's a very interesting question. I don't know if he read Tim Drake first or Jason Todd with The Cult. I'll have to ask him on that one. Maybe that'll be something I'll try to bring up on our next episode. It's interesting to kind of take a look at this whole Robin relationship and where did you start? And I agree with you, though, that Death in the Family is fantastic in collected form. I've read it since in collected form. And it is great to read that story complete with the beginning from A to B. That was a long month in between issues when there was the voting going on, wondering was he going to die or not. That was an exciting thing that they did. I give them credit for putting the phone numbers out there, because I remember at the time the waiting in between. Is he going to be back? Is he not? What's going to happen at the end of the issue? I do think that's why I so totally, if that issue, I don't know how far they got to completing it. If they actually completed the other version of the issue, I would adore reading that because I would love to have seen what path would it have gone down if he'd lived. I know I've mentioned that before on the show, but I just think that's fascinating that they threw this out there. And at the time, it was such an odd thing. So thanks for sharing that. Thanks for calling in. Joining us right now, Jim and I are recording our Gail Simone Spotlight episode right now. And I saw that the phone call was coming in and Darrell Taylor was calling. So I picked it up and I'm like, let me answer it. Why not? Let's see what's happening here. And you said you were going to call in with a voicemail. So what were you calling for?
Batgirl. I started it. This is another book that you guys, it's your fault to talk about so much. I picked up issues all the way from, I think I read from 6, and I just finished up to 13 in like 2 days. And I absolutely love this book.
Isn't she fantastic? I'm a Cassandra Cain fan. I loved Cassandra Cain, so it wasn't an issue of me. I don't look at this, though, as choosing between her and Cassandra Cain. No. Stephanie's evolution from when she was Robin. I liked that brief run where she played as Robin in the Bat books. I thought that was very cool. I think this is a logical progression from that. We've seen her come to a very different place right now. Her as Batgirl is something I'm just totally digging. Jim, what about you? Are you into her as Batgirl? Where does that book rank on your Thursday, Friday, Saturday reads?
Batgirl is definitely a Thursday read. It sometimes is a Friday read just because I run out of time. It's what I would call a low Thursday, so that it's, not one of the first books I read through. But depending on what comes out, I'll read that on a Thursday. I'm really, Stephanie is a great character. I really like her. I really enjoy her. I wasn't a Cassandra Cain reader. It wasn't until her miniseries that I really actually dealt anything and had any lengthy dealings with her. So for me, Batgirl was Barbara Gordon, and I see Stephanie as a very similar, not the same cookie cutter, Batgirl, but that same kind of style to her. That is a great, a great follow up to Barbara Gordon. It's kind of like the same way I really latched onto Tim as Robin. Because, for me, he really was kind of my Robin that came into this. I really didn't have any good connections with Jason Todd at the time, so I only knew Dick Grayson Robin and then Tim, Drake Robin. So it's, for me, the same, very similar deals, and especially since Stephanie has that long Robin history with Tim and, everything that happened between them, I think it's a great, great character that I truly enjoy.
Oh, I couldn't stand her, though, the last... I could not stand her during the war drums. Like, I still didn't forgive her for getting Orpheus killed when she set off that, scenario that set the gangs up against each other. And the scenario with the war drums that when the gang wars started, when she set off that plan that Bruce never wanted to set off. It was just something that he was, I guess it was some kind of little thing he was playing with to see if maybe he could take out all the gangs in Gotham. And she set it off because she was kind of angry when he fired her as Robin. So I always, like, from that was the last story I got of her, was when she set that off, and then she was murdered by, well, we thought she was murdered by Death Mask. I didn't like her, but then I like how Brian Miller, when he brought her back, he didn't just forget about all that previous history. He actually, part of her story, which I like, is that she said in one of the issues that I could never make up for what I did, but she's going to keep trying to do the best that she can. And it made me think of, this run makes me think of Chuck Dixon.
Yeah.
The way that he wrote Tim, always trying to do better, the internal monologue, everything she tries to do is, I'm going to try to do better. Not to gain, something selfish for myself, but to do better than what I did, to try to help people and try to somehow contribute to Gotham, I guess, in a way that she felt that she might have heard it, when she was last in Gotham from that storyline. So I love it.
Hope is a word that comes to mind with her. She brings hope to Gotham. She's very positive. it's her book's fun. There's something like fun and exciting about reading Stephanie Brown, and she's a character who's enjoying what she's doing. And I love that there's a sense of humor to her, and there's a sense of newness in what she's doing, yet you feel like she's been around doing this for a while, which for her it was always like, how am I going to screw up now? I don't feel that vibe from her anymore. And I feel that was something that's organically grown as the series has gone on. Her confidence in who she is. She's earned this mantle. She's earned this title. I am so anxious to see her with Bruce.
Yeah.
He owes her an apology.
Oh, yeah.
Because rereading the old stories with that, he really did. He treated her like crap. Like, using her with Tim, to get Tim to come back.
And I think we're going to see with this, we're going to see Bruce come back, and I think we're going to see a different attitude out of him. And I do think we're going to see somebody who's going to give a nod to her in what she's doing.
I hope so.
Yeah. There's got to be something. And I don't want to see a overly emotional response, but there's got to be just a level of respect and a nod that she's doing what she's doing.
Yeah, you earned this. Like, I just want Bruce to say to her just one time, you earned it. Because even when she thought she was going to die, the one thing she asked is, was I ever considered Robin? That meant so much to her, and the way that he told her he did, but I just want that closure to be done. Like, when Bruce Wayne comes back, the way it looks like the stories are going to be is that he's going to have a sense of closure with the people in his lives that he didn't take the time to mend things that were unspoken.
And I want to read that. That's something that I'm excited to see in his return, is those moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, and I just have to say one thing, because I listened to the last episode last night, and then I finished it today. And Jim, you almost had me choking up when you were talking about the war story.
Yeah.
I mean, just from talking about it, I didn't read the story, but I got exactly what you were trying to say. Like, I could feel it in the way you're explaining it, and emotionally, it affects me too. Living in New York, I had a neighbor who he just walked out the building when it fell. Like, he had the dust on him when it came. When I saw him, he was a messenger in the building, and he had just got out the building. And all he got hit with was the dust, but the dust was still on his clothes when I saw him. So, and I grew up with him.
What would that be like, though? I mean, my respect level for people who went through that. I mean, to walk home with the dust on you. I mean, you are talk about being touched about. I mean, I think a lot of people were touched on the event as far as if they had family in there, in a way that nobody can understand. I can't understand. I would have trouble understanding how somebody who was there to the point where elements of the building were on them. I mean, that's I can't even fathom what that. I'm not going to even try to pretend that I understand what they went through or what that experience was like or how it still affects them to this day, because it was such a devastating event. And that was something I thought that comic really captured for readers who weren't, because I wasn't a part of that. I'm not going to pretend that I was, other than the fact that my family and one of my best friends happened to be traveling that day. Mm-hmm. And I was worried about, was their plane somehow, were they on a connecting flight that could have somehow been one of these? But that doesn't compare to what the people were going through that had people who were definitely in those buildings or people that like just barely got out of the buildings. And that, I love that it conveyed with the soldier, the fact that he had been there and he, if it wasn't for the inhaler that he went back for, he would have been a part of that. And you got to question, where would he have wanted to be when all that was going down? It was a very good story that I thought was just emotionally moving and kind of put me in a place where I respect so much that I don't understand what people went through that were a part of that. And it really hit home for me that, like, it is something that should be respected and cared about. It's cool.
Yeah, well, you did it again. I mean, it's something I'm going to have to look for and just to have it. I'm just glad you talked about it so that people can get a sense of it. Just what what the writer was trying to convey to people. So
it was a great one shot.
Yeah. That's a definite, recommend pickup to anybody. That was a very moving piece.
And that was the Mike Martz Our Army at War.
Yep.
Actually, we should say that, the one shot that just came. It was the first one that kicked off These war, and someone was Sergeant Rock on the cover. So definitely consider picking that one up if you haven't, because it's a very moving story. Actually, if anybody else has any comments about it you'd like to call in about, please do so, because I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. With a different perspective. I mean, Darrell, when you were I was moved by your story when you were telling me. I had a friend of mine who was like coming out of there. I'm like, wow, that's something I'll never understand. I mean, even what you went through, you know somebody who was touched by this in a very personal way, that they were a part of it. I can't understand that. I didn't have that experience. And that's just all that moves me on it. It helps me understand, especially with how much this is in the media now, just why there's so many people emotionally charged right now and where that comes from. It's funny how a comic book story, and I don't think at all that was the intention of the story, but it's funny how that story opened up my understanding in a very different way than I probably would have before I read that comic book. It educated me.
Well, it's so fun. It's so weird that when I listened to the episode and you described the book, I talked to a friend of mine earlier where her brother is going, he's just leaving today to do a tour over in Iraq. And she was just talking about how sad she was, that, they had their family time, and then he had to go. And he's only going for a year, but just, it not only does the 9/11 stuff, but there's all over the world. Like when you think about, we hear about stuff on the news about, schools getting blown up or buses getting, shot up and stuff like that. It doesn't seem real because we're in the United States and we've been blessed enough to not go through a lot of those terrorist things that other countries go through on a regular basis. So when you really, like when I put myself in that mind frame, really thinking about, how would I feel if I was in that building and I had to deal with a plane coming towards me, what choice I would make. I couldn't fathom how to deal with that. Like I only had a friend who went through that and he got out, but I don't know what anybody feels like who is either in the building or lost somebody in that building or lost somebody to any type of, terrorist attack.
I talk to my students about this a lot in the sense of, and it's not the same thing as terrorists, but actually we do. We have drills now, which we didn't have when I started. We have a crisis drill, which is meant to be if somebody were to come into the building. There's different codes for get out of the building. There's different codes for what door you can go out of, because we have 4 different doors you could go out of. There's different codes for stay in your room and hide. There's different codes that were given for that purpose, which is something when I started teaching we didn't have that. We have your basic fire drill and tornado drill. But when I talk about the fire drill is the first one we do during the year, and when I introduce the concept of those drills, I tell the kids, the reason why we do these drills and why you have to take them seriously and follow directions and make sure you know what to do is these things have happened somewhere. Mm-hmm. And I said, we've been fortunate enough that in my time teaching, we haven't had a fire, we haven't had a tornado, we haven't had anybody come into the building where we've had to be worried. But yet, that's always a concern, and you don't want to be the building where that happens and not to be safe. So I always tell the kids, and I teach third graders, so you got to be careful. You don't want to terrify the kids. So I do it in a way where I stay general, but tell them that you got to remember. And I usually use fire drill as the best one. I've had students before whose houses have gotten caught on fire. Where they've lost everything in the house. So I use that as my example and tell the kids, hey, all of these things can really happen. If something were to happen here, we want to make sure that every single one of you is safe. We don't want to say, geez, we didn't practice enough and somebody got hurt or somebody got left behind. We practice to make sure that that never happens, that you never have anything to worry about. If something real were to happen, you guys are going to know what to do. You're going to be safe and all that. It's sad that we live in a world, though, where, as a teacher now, we're having crisis drills. And we've been doing it, and I totally agree with, I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it. It's just the opposite. I fundamentally agree that we should have them. But it's sad that we live in a world where we have to have crisis drills in a school because we're afraid that somebody's going to come in and do something at the school. And it all stems from these drills started after 9/11. And that opened our eyes that you have to be careful everywhere, every public building. Every building was a lot of, where there's a lot of people, because there's a possibility that it can be used to make statements, because those were things that were threatened during that time, where schools and buildings like that were potential targets. So we had to worry about that. And that's something to this day, hopefully we're a little safer and we're a little smarter. And that if something like that were to happen again, we would, make sure to be aware of it and safe. But educating kids that way and helping them understand it was something that's really changed for me and my view and how I explain those things now.
Yeah, I don't know how you tell a child, like even people that live in Iraq or Africa, or, I don't know how you can explain to a child that at any time somebody could try to kill you. Like, it's hard that you want to protect kids from stuff like this, but it's to a point where to protect them, you have to let them know that this stuff can happen.
Well, and that our goal is, though, and the way you do it with kids, because you don't want to terrify them.
No.
I mean, it really is to let them know that the things that we do, I focus less on the fact that I don't say things like, that there's people that could kill you and things like that. I don't say that to kids, because that's, first of all, it's just going to terrify them, and they're going to be focused on that and not on the fact that really our overall goal is these things that we're doing, the reason why we keep doing them over and over again to practice them is to make sure that you're safe. And it's because, and I use the terms bad things happen, and that because bad things happen, we want to make sure that if something were to happen that's bad, that we know what to do and that we're all safe, so that the bad thing that happens doesn't hurt any of us. And that's the way I always focus on it. But I really feel sad that I have to even put my students in that position because of the fact that there's those real realities in our world. And it was funny, that comic book just so totally hit home for me in a different way as a teacher who has to, address these concerns with my students. And I have to be tactful in how I do it, because I have to be concerned with their emotions and their sense of safety, because I always want them to feel safe when they come to my classroom, and that's a safe spot. But it was that comic hit me from a very different perspective on, these are ills that are really there in the world, and they really do affect people, and look what happened to these people, and we need to learn from that. And if there's one lesson that comes out of this whole thing is that, it's how do we react differently now, so that if somebody were to try something bad again or do something bad again, that we're in a better position to try and protect ourselves and to be safe, and hopefully that we don't have something so horrible happen again. And it was just a very moving comic that on so many levels, and even on the war aspect of it, because I don't understand, that's not something I have a connection to. It opened my eyes as well. It was very well written throughout, and I love that it wasn't preachy. And I said this last time when we talked about it. I never felt like it was, trying to be condescending and preachy. It was just a good emotional story that was just well told, with characters that were richly developed and events that made sense for the book. The events made sense for the story, and that's why they were in there, versus it being a piece where we're going to tell something about the events and we're going to wrap a story around it, if I'm making any sense there. The story just made sense for everything that they did, and those events I felt were pulled into there because it was good for the story. And I felt that because the characters were so richly developed, that I connected with these events in a way that was very different than I expected from a comic.
Well, I'm not really into the war comic stuff, but any story that could show soldiers as humans, when they go to the human side of soldiers, because my hat goes off to the armed forces, period. Whether, you're Democrat, Republican, doesn't even matter. The point is, soldiers go into the line of fire. When they go, we run from explosions and missiles. They go into those kind of places. And I don't know how they can do it and keep themselves together, to do all those tours. But like anything that shows them, like any comic from even Secret Warriors to, the Sergeant Rock story, when they write it's fun to do the action and all that. But when they show a group of the soldiers talking to each other, about what they went through, like I like to read those type of stories. And how it affects them and their families, and when they come home, because that's the stories we don't hear, is when soldiers come home, what they have to deal with, because my mother used to, when she was working, she worked for the state, and her job was to get soldiers jobs, to get them kind of re-antiquated back into normal life, finding them work and things like that. And it's just what they went through and how they have to deal with just normal things. Like some of them can't be in a room with more than 5 people because it makes them nervous. And when they enter a room, they're always looking because they can't, they've trained themselves to always look for danger. So it's just something that for them to come home and have to, just deal with just waking up without bombs and explosions and things like that. It's just, so I always love to see stories like that where you get to hear their side of it.
Darrell, want to make sure everyone remembers to listen to DeFixer's Hideout, No Apologies, Comic Book Roadshow, and you have another one that I've been following. That was you did one with Donnie Salvo, didn't you? Just recently. I haven't had a chance to listen yet. I downloaded it. Well,
thank you. We watch a lot of TV, and it's fun to be able to do a show on different. We'll do like a Netflix movie, and we'll pick certain programs, and we'll talk about those programs and stuff. But we have a good time.
What's the title of that one again? I'm drawing a blank at the moment.
It's called Nothing's on Podcast. Right now, the feed is not active. It should be active this week, but it's on. You can go on the No Apologies feed and get the episodes off of there because we're only 3 episodes in right now.
Yeah, I first noticed it on Facebook. You guys had made mention of it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Donnie's a friend of the show, and we've had Donnie on before. And just hearing you guys chit-chatting together, I'm like, I'm really excited for this. And it's fun. I'm thinking of listening to you guys on the weekend because that will be done doing our recording, which is my time to go back then and listen to friends' shows. And
right.
It's really great. I love it because it's you're really kind of, I've noticed with your podcasts, as you do a new podcast or come up with a new podcast idea, it's really like, what am I not talking about that I enjoy, and how can I come up with a really cool way to make that into a podcast? I like how you're kind of branching out with your podcasts in that each one is unique, and I think it's very cool what you're doing with your podcast. So I just wanted to shout that out as long as you're on here right now.
Appreciate that. I try.
So we're going to see you at the New York Comic Con.
And the panel.
That should be awesome. I can't wait for that. We're going to be less than a month.
I know.
I'm so excited. I'm ready.
Is that panel 6:30? Is that correct?
Yeah, 6:30 on Friday.
Okay. I'm going to wrap up right there. And
There they are, all alone except for that old character.
our sponsors for this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. I want to remind everyone that DCBService.com has more than just comics. They have a wonderful collection of DVDs, statues, trade collections, novels, you name it. DCB Service carries. It's basically anything that's in the previews catalog. And a lot of what sparked this for me was it's the end of the month and they're getting ready to put up the new books. And Jim was mentioning to me as we were watching Smallville that he gets all of his DC DVDs direct from DCBService.com, which is something I've never done. And it's a wonderful idea because he's saving money on paying any kind of shipping from getting those DVDs with his comic book shipments. We both do our shipments weekly, and I'm like, really? You get that around the same time I do, just from getting it from DCBService.com. So it's a wonderful idea, and I wanted to pass that on to any of our listeners that are already using the service that, hey, you might want to check out taking this route and saving on shipping. So that's very, very cool, and thank you, DCBService.com, for your continued support of Raging Bullets. Over at InStockTrades.com. I mentioned this at the beginning, and I'd like to shout out things that I've really enjoyed myself. The World's Greatest Superheroes trade paperback. And this is Paul Dini, Alex Ross, 400-page count of gorgeous artwork and really great storytelling. $29.99 regularly, 37% off, only $18.89. Thank you, InStockTrades.com, for your continued support of the show. Want to remind everyone about ComicCollectorLive.com. ComicCollectorLive.com, your comic book management source. Also, remind everyone to check us out and Get Your Geek on Radio. GetYourGeekOnRadio.com, a radio station committed to making geek chic. Our next episode, we're going to continue talking about The Cult. We're going to wrap up that. I was originally considering putting a Smallville episode in between, and in thinking about it, with the release of the Superman Batman Apocalypse DVD coming out so soon, we decided to wait, and we're going to do kind of a Smallville season opener mixed with that. And when I say Smallville season opener, whatever episodes are current as of when we record that episode, we'll kind of do like the first 2 or 3 episodes of Smallville, and just kind of a casual chat about the series and how we're liking the kickoff to the final season. At this stage, it's Saturday morning, and I'm wrapping wrapping up the editing of the program. And we'd watched Smallville last night. Actually, Jim and my friend Chris Kendall were over here, and we were just chatting and really enjoying that wonderful opening to Smallville this season. It just looks big. It looks huge. And I want to say things, but I know some of our listeners might not have seen it yet, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut for now on this one. But Smallville, Season 10, it's going to be good. And that episode will be coming up soon. We're also going to do, after the cult, an episode where we catch up on some current comics. We want to get in a couple of these shows before we hit the New York Comic Con. I don't know if the Smallville one's going to come first or if the current comics one are. It'll all depend. But we're also going to be chatting, like I said, that Superman Batman Apocalypse DVD. So if you haven't gotten that one, definitely one to pick up because we're going to chat about it on the show. So very, very cool stuff coming up. We will see you next week.
Bye.
Flying through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Faded for love and flaws and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman. Eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan. What you do to me, Hawkman. The villains are closing in, be they Thanon Guard or Egyptian. Working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up. Things would be so much easier if you would just call for backup. Hawkman, Hawkman. Eagle eyes can't see your plan and what you do to me. Hawkman, Hawkman. Eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan and what you do to me. Hawkman. Hawkman.